OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
All right, it's 7:30 this Wednesday morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. It's Chair Gilroy with you all the way through until 10. We'd love to hear from you, as ever. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. You can leave a comment on the YouTube stream. And we're going to be here talking hurling with James Skehill a little bit later on. We have Ireland's newest golfing sensation, Olivia Mehaffey, with us. Basically an introduction to her career. She's just turned pro after a glittering career in Arizona in the amateur game, where she played in the US Open, she played in Augusta National, she played in the British Open, and loads more as well. So we'll talk with Olivia a little bit later on in the show. And we're going to be doing a deal or no deal. The headline at the moment is that Paris Saint-Germain are thinking about, pondering the notion of a £50 million offer for Paul Pogba. Now, at the start of the season last year, the Manchester United fans said we would drive Pogba to the airport if somebody came in for him. But then he started to play quite well, and he's just off the back of an absolutely brilliant tournament. So, as a Manchester United fan this morning, we're asking you, are you still driving Pogba to the airport if an offer of 50 million quid comes in for him? Are you saying, OK, we have failed so far to build a team around this particular talent, and we're going to let somebody else do that, take the 50 million quid and spend it on somebody else, like Declan Rice maybe, I don't know. You decide. But we'd like to hear from you. If you are indeed a Manchester United fan, you're thinking about what the future might look like without Paul Pogba. We'll talk about that on Deal or No Deal with Phil a little bit later on. The other thing that's happened overnight, of course, is that a Lions team was leaked. Now, is this the actual team? Potentially. The news came through yesterday that the team would be told to the players, and that the players who were left out would have to mimic their South African counterparts ahead of the game this weekend, which obviously you can hear in glorious Technicolor on Off the Ball on Saturday at 5 o'clock with Brian O'Driscoll on commentary duty alongside Neil Tracy. So it's very possible that one of those disappointed players or one of those very happy players told a partner, an agent, a mate, a brother, a sister, somebody who was in the team. This is traditionally how it happens, that a single journalist with a connection to somebody ends up getting the team in advance. Certainly down through the years when the Ireland team was being linked, it tended not to have come from the actual management themselves. Who knows, right? But the team was an interesting team. I'm not sure, certainly the first place that most people saw a bit of an outcry about it was on the Welsh media. They were getting particularly salty about the fact that several of their favourite players weren't in the starting team, and then also not in the squad. So Felipe Faletau, for example, is not at number 8. Jack Conan is at number 8. There are 3 Irishmen in the leaked starting 15. I'm sure you've seen this by now. Robbie Henshaw is the sole back that we have, which means that Conor Murray, who started out as potential Test Series captain, has to make do with a place on the bench. Obviously, Tadhg Furlong starts. We kind of knew that he was the only nailed-on starter that we had, but Jack Conan has made a late bid and has made it all the way into the starting position. According to the league team, we'll get the actual team fully, properly confirmed by Gatland in the press today. If you haven't seen this so far, this is the team that every single media outlet in the world has gone with because Lions content does well, or because they think it's accurate. I'm not quite sure yet. Ali Price does start at scrum half. Dan Biggar starts at out half. Duhan van der Merwe, despite his slightly dodgy defensive skills, is going to be on the wing against his countryman. Anthony Watson's on the other wing. It's Robbie Henshaw and Elliot Daly in the centres, and Stuart Hogg gets the nod at full back. So it has some attacking prowess, a bit of vim and vigour, certainly physicality right across there. Not enough physicality required for Bundy Aki to make the team, but there you go. And it's Wyn Jones, Luke Cowan-Dickey and Tadhg Furlong in the front row. Alan Wyn Jones captains the team after his miraculous recovery. Maro Itoje alongside him, and then Courtney Laws does get the start. So it's Courtney Laws, Tom Curry and Jack Conan as the 6, 7 and 8. The replacements: Ken Owens, Rory Sutherland, Kyle Sinclair. Tadhg Byrne is on the bench alongside Hamish Watson. So Tadhg Byrne obviously covers both back row and second row, but he's in as one of, it's a 6-2 split, I should have said that too. Ian Henderson also on the bench alongside Conor Murray and Owen Farrell. So Murray and Farrell will definitely see some game time, you would expect, given the nature of how these games have gone over the years. And that is the team that was overnight has so annoyed the Welsh media And I don't know how you feel about it as an Irish rugby fan out there watching us this morning, or indeed if you're a South African rugby fan. We are going to talk about South African rugby with our resident South African, Stephen Kisbey-Green, is going to join us a little bit later on to basically brag about 2009 and hopefully to incite the flames of the rivalry while we very carefully explain to him why, of all of the tours and of all of the test nations that we play against, beating the South Africans seems to mean the most to everybody else. We'd love to hear from you this morning. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number, or of course you can always leave a comment on the YouTube stream. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock. We've got a reflection on last night's football with Celtic in action against Midtjylland, finished 1-1, and some of the lessons to be learned from the pre-season friendlies. They're back. The football, English football, Scottish football never actually took a break this summer. James Skehill is going to talk to us at around about 8:05 about last weekend's hurling and a preview of the big games coming this weekend. We've had a huge response so far to all of the pieces that we've done with James Skehill, so that's coming your way at around about 8:05. As I said, Olivia Mehaffey, one of the rising stars of Irish golf, who has just turned professional, is going to join us at around about 8:30. We'll run you through the sports pages at 8:45. We have our South African explainer with Stephen Kisbey-Green coming your way at 9, and then Deal or No Deal, Phil's going to join us again at 9:10, and we have more reaction coming your way, including some Formula 1 stuff at around about 9:30 this morning as well. Very quickly running you through some of the back page headlines. Murray blow, Lions set to go with Price at number 9. Bad boys, rocky start for Celtic under the new manager. O'Donoghue steps away from the Kerry panel. I think James O'Donoghue is going to be one of those sporting careers where we have very brief understanding of just how great his talents were, Footballer of the Year, and it's going to be one of those ultimately that we really wish that he'd had better luck with injuries, so we get the opportunity to have seen what he could have done. The London Times, Price in as Lions bid to blitz box. That's Owen Slott's piece. So that's Alex Lowe, actually. So Alex Lowe is claiming that the league team is correct. So he's saying that all of that information that we've just given you there. Luke Cowan-Dickey's form has been rewarded with the start at hooker. Jack Conan has been referred to Lupe Faletau at 8, and Duhan van der Merwe is a surprise choice on the wing ahead of Josh Adams. So the focus of the 15 is pace and dynamism, says Alex Lowe with that one. And then, just very briefly, I'll give you one of the other back pages here. So the back page of the Irish Independent this morning. Conan set for Lions number 8 role, but Murray to miss out. And Mullen slams unbalanced and one-sided profile of racing industry. That is Tony Mullins, who's jumped to racing's defence after the Panorama documentary on BBC the other night. Kerry hoping to get green light for 4,000 fans at Munster final. They ain't moving that game to Dublin come hell or high water. It is 7:38 this morning. As I said, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Phil Egan is with us. Phil, good morning to you.
Morning, Jared. How are you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. There was quite a lot of football on TV last night.
I watched Liverpool play 2 pre-season games. Now, they were, when I say it was 2 games, like they were half an hour long. So they started at 5, started the second game at 5:45. And then I watched the Celtic game. I actually thought Celtic were really good last night. And I know one of the headlines said it wasn't a great result, but take out the away goals rule is gone now. And
well, I was going to say, it's like stereotypically it's a really bad result to draw 1-1 at home, but now it doesn't matter at all.
No, and look, both teams finished with 10 men. Beaton's sending off was so stupid. He was on a yellow and he got sent off for the second yellow towards the end of the first half when the guy Dreyer, who actually ended up getting sent off in the second half, went diving in the penalty area. So the first thing I thought was Beaton was going to get sent off for bringing him down, because it looked like he was trying to... It
was a good dive.
Hunt him down, and I thought he was going to have a nibble at him. He didn't. He did the hard part. He avoided that. Dreyer goes down, and then Beaton decides, do you know what? You're a diver. And he poked him in the head with his finger. He pointed at him to basically say, don't do that. Poked him. Dreyer made a bit of a meal of it, but you can't touch anyone's face. Second yellow, and Celtic are up against it. But then when Dreyer gets sent off in the second half for another yellow for simulation, you think, right, Celtic are back in, like they're back in the driving seat, because they were really good. First 15 minutes they were a bit slow, but I thought then they really stepped it up and played with high energy, played with a purpose going forward. And the crowd really got into it. There's only 9,000 there, but honestly it sounded like there was 30,000 at the game. And then they conceded a really poor goal. Barkas, the keeper, at fault, and just changes the thinking going into next week. But as I said, it's not as bad as it would have been last season with the away goal. And Ange Postecoglou said after the game, the Celtic manager, that they'd only one training session. This squad only had one training session together. Now, they obviously played a few pre-season games, but the team that started last night. So I think he was pretty happy with it. As I said, the fact that you have to play with 10 men, which effectively, I know it is a Champions League qualifier, but they're still in pre-season. The last thing you want to be doing is playing a game with 10 men and a man down, where you got to cover that little bit of extra ground because one of your teammates decides that they're going to poke someone on the head.
What was the style of play? I mean, obviously, I'm not drawing any conclusions or asking you to draw any conclusions. What do we think an Ange Postecoglou team is going to play like? How do they line up? Is there anything that we're kind of, as an introduction?
Okay, there was a few things, obviously. So they played with a lot of energy, and they played with more purpose and looking forward rather than sideways passing. Now, I think we're going to see a lot more of that this season, because, you know, we have to think of last season when there was no fans there, and, you know, there's no energy in the stadium, and, you know, the tempo can drop. And, you know, when you play in front of a crowd, that if there is a little bit of drop off in tempo, the crowd get on your back, basically say, you know, pick it up here. And I felt once the Celtic crowd got into the game last night, then you could just see Celtic were playing definitely more on the front foot. Another thing that was noticeable was Greg Taylor, the left back, was doing Philip Lam. He was dropping into midfield. Right. And, you know, it was something that obviously it was pre-planned. Midtjylland were trying to press, and this is a way of trying to get an extra man into midfield at times. So that was just one thing that was noticeable early enough in the game. But yeah, still very early days. But obviously Abada got the goal on his debut. I thought Sorrow in midfield was very good for Celtic. McGregor is obviously the new captain. He had a good game. So the goalkeeper is still a bit of an issue. Barkas obviously had a chance last night to show that he deserves to be number one, but he was really poor for the goal. But yeah, I don't really know what the expectations are for Celtic fans this season, because let's be honest, Postecoglou was an appointment nobody saw coming. 8th or 9th choice, maybe. Yeah. Everyone thought Eddie Howe was the shoe-in. Yeah. Postecoglou got it. He's obviously got experience at international level. Anyone that's worked with him speaks highly of him. So is it a case of just give the guy a chance? And there was, I said, plenty to be encouraged by last night, but the problem is if they go out and lose in Denmark next week, then it kind of undoes all the good work. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Wim Jansen wasn't the first choice when he got the gig, and that worked out okay. So there's definitely a history at Celtic of them accidentally finding the right man for the role at various stages in the past, and it has worked for them. What's the mood music like amongst the Celtic fans? I know you're saying they don't really know or what their expectations should be. Obviously, because they've won 9 of the last 10 titles. Yeah. Expectations are going to be pretty high, but suddenly Rangers are a realistic title contender, having just won the league, and are the defending champions. So do they just want to be in a title race that lasts the whole season? Will that be considered progress, or because the standards are so high, unless you actually win the title, it's a failure? I think it's a failure if you don't win the title. I think Celtic would have felt at the start of last season they should have won the league. They had the squad to do it, but they just didn't perform, and so there was a lot of anger, and obviously the season to fall off your 9 in a row, you're going for that historic 10 in a row, and you couldn't have picked a worse season to have such a bad campaign. So no, they'll be expecting to bounce back and thinking that they have to win the league, and you know they still have some really good players. So I think we could have a really good title race this season, and I think having the crowd back, obviously we know Celtic Park is a bit of a fortress. Well, it has been in the past, and it's about trying to get that back. And it comes down to those old firms. Those games against Rangers usually decide who wins the league. Now, Celtic were dropping points in other games as well last season, so I think obviously if they start well, then it means that the crowd kind of are on board with Postecoglou and some of the new signings. So But because of the fact that it is really just Celtic and Rangers, if you don't win the league, it's failure.
Is the squad as good as it was? And also, I mean, basically since his first 5 or 6 months, every transfer window since, people have assumed Edouard was leaving, and certainly this time last year, I'm pretty sure the speculation was very intense about him joining a Premier League club. It hasn't happened just yet. Do you expect him to still be there?
Well, he started last night, so I mean that would be encouraging when you think of obviously Ayer as he's gone to Brentford. Olivier Cham was left out, so the fact that he included him would be a positive. But unfortunately, he has been linked with Leicester. He knows Brendan Rodgers. It's very hard to turn that down if Leicester come, and also if the price is right, it's hard for Celtic to turn that kind of money down. Okay,
so you wouldn't be terribly surprised if he was gone. And you mentioned Ayer joined Brentford yesterday for 13.5 million. Is that where Celtic are at the moment? There was a period of time under Brendan Rodgers when they were investing, and they were investing more than they had at any period, essentially since the start of the Martin O'Neill time. That cycle seems to have gone backwards. They're now a club who are looking to buy cheap and sell on. It's a European model, in fairness.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, like that, there's been such a turnover now in terms of staff in the last few months, and like with managers, CEOs, and it's hard to know what the plan is going to be. But unfortunately for so many clubs now, because of the pandemic, and you're losing all those gate receipts, now clubs are so much more vulnerable that if people throw money at you and say, we want to take your best players, it's very hard to turn it down. So, but I would imagine Postecoglou would have assurances of being able to hold on to certain players. And, you know, does he, like, don't forget they do have the Japanese international striker to come in. He's obviously arrived in the UK. He's going to have to quarantine. But, so they have signed players. And,
okay.
Yeah, I think that's just where Scottish football is at. That Celtic and Rangers are obviously the two giants of Scottish football, but the Premier League is just in a different level at the moment in terms of the quality, but the money. I mean,
yeah,
all the money is in the Premier League. Even, I mean, we'll talk about it later when we're talking about transfers, but even the top leagues in Europe, they can't compete anymore with the Premier League.
Yeah, in fairness, Leicester could sign Edouard, keep him on the bench, and he could just be a bit part player for them over the next 3 years, and he would still earn 3-4 times as much as he's going to earn at Celtic, and Celtic could do with the cash for that as well. Okay, so let's talk about Liverpool last night, up against Wacker Innsbruck and Stuttgart.
Yeah. So the first game was against Wacker Innsbruck.
This Wacker goes to Stuttgart. Is there not a? Is there not like a? There must be somewhere somebody has come up with a pun for this.
I hope so, but yeah, interesting to see the different lineups. The second game, the Stuttgart game, was that Klopp went stronger with that one. But in the first game, obviously, had Trent Alexander-Arnold starting in a back four that included Ben Davis. Saw Ben Davis in a Liverpool jersey. Joel Matip was playing as well, and then Loris Karius was in goal. He was in goal for the first game. They drew 1-1 in both games. Now, I don't know. Am I being harsh on Karius where I thought could have done it a bit better for the goal? It was a good header, but it's one of those that comes across the box, and if you're a keeper, you track it. But I think he's tracked it too much, where he's gone onto his near post, where if he had left a little bit of room between him and the near post, it meant he could get across to the far post where the header went back to. But I just think Liverpool fans, they see Loris Karius, they know he's never going to play for Liverpool again in a competitive game, but it still brings back those memories. It does, because you know, it was an absolute meltdown in a Champions League final of all things to do. But you know what, they bounced back from it, and in a way it sealed the Alisson move, where Klopp said, right, I have to get this done, because you can't have your goalkeeper chucking ones in a Champions League final.
Karius is going to be the third goalkeeper that they carry, or will they get rid of him?
They'll be looking to get rid of him.
Just to even send him out on loan again if they have to.
Yeah, so Adrian played the second game. No Caoimhín Kelleher now. I wasn't sure what the story was of that. We obviously know he signed his long-term contract. He's seen as the number 2 behind Alisson. So in terms of the first game, young lad Cade Gordon caught the eye. Divock Origi scored a penalty. It was never a penalty. Minamino played, didn't look great. Look, it's only pre-season, but when you haven't seen certain players, you see obviously Van Dijk and Joe Gomez are sitting on the sidelines. That gets Liverpool fans excited because they can't be that far away. You see Joe Matip playing, Ben Davis. I know Kabak and Davis were signed at the same time, and Kabak came in and played a few games. Davis didn't get any game time, and people thought this is a bizarre one, but it could be that classic case of Klopp looking at a player thinking he needs time to learn the way. And also as well, probably no harm the fact that he didn't play last season, in the fact that Kabak, when he came into the Liverpool team, he obviously was involved in that goal against Leicester where Alisson and him were mixed up. But some Liverpool fans had made their mind up on Kabak after 2 games that this lad was rubbish.
Yeah, I thought that from Liverpool's perspective, he was relatively cheap, very young, has good experience, would have been the type of player that you could get in, have him grow, play some football for you over the next couple of seasons, but they've decided not to go that route.
No, because maybe they're looking at someone like Ben Davis, who's obviously left-footed as well and can play as a left-back if they needed cover in that area. But Van Dijk is back, Gomez is back, Konate has been signed. That was always the long-term plan, to sign Konate. Kabak was an option to buy, but they've obviously decided they don't need to have somebody like him on the books anymore. So Konate played in the second game. We didn't get to see that much of him. There was a few incidents where balls were played over him. They were offside. Now, that rule where you have to keep playing till the flag goes up, but my God, his recovery pace is frightening. Like, if he's hunting you down, he's going to catch you. And if you're a striker and you know he's breathing down your neck, that's going to put you under pressure. Salah played, Oxlade-Chamberlain played up front in the Roberto Firmino role. This is something they've been working on in pre-season. Not sure how it's going to work because it's a tough role to play, where Oxlade-Chamberlain is at his best when you're running at players and he's eating up the ground and we know he's got a good shot in him. Playing with your back to goal, like Firmino does it so well, or has done it so well, because technically he's got such a good touch that you can fizz it in at him, takes the sting out of it and brings other players in. So that's something that Oxlade-Chamberlain, they tried it out there. Tsimikas played left back. I mentioned Ben Davis being an option at left back. Tsimikas was signed last season, didn't feature that much, had injuries.
Did he get COVID as well at one point?
Well, you get, like, also as well, if you're moving to a club during a pandemic, it's not the easiest. I think Liverpool are going to see the benefits of the likes of Thiago and Tsimikas obviously have a season under their belt, and there's seasons that you can't really judge them on too much because they played in empty stadiums. They didn't really get to, get bedded into the new environment of moving to Liverpool in terms of the club, but also the city as well, because everyone was living in a bubble.
Yeah,
so,
I think certainly all the Liverpool fans are hoping that we can reverse time a little bit, do the Superman flying around the earth so fast that it reverses back, and that the reality is that last season is a season that will have an asterisk beside it forever because it was the season behind closed doors, and that actually football restarts from where it picked off, where Liverpool were the best team in English football. I mean, if everybody's fit, and is there any reason to believe that they won't be as good as they have been in recent seasons?
No, I think if you were going to have a bad season, last season was the season to have it. I mean, we're saying they had a bad season. They still finished third. That's the encouraging thing. They rallied when it looked like they were doomed. At one stage, you were thinking, right, there's no way they're getting Champions League. They're going to end up in the Conference League, which I'm not knocking the Conference League because, as we've seen, the League of Ireland clubs are doing well in it now. But Liverpool did not want to be in the Conference League. They didn't want to be in the Europa League. So they rally at the end, they get the Champions League place. And that would suggest that there's room for plenty more optimism this season, because then you obviously bring back Ian Van Dijk, if Konate. I would imagine there will be a couple more additions to the squad beforehand. You would like to think, as a Liverpool fan, you'd be hoping that Jurgen Klopp adds to midfield, especially if Wijnaldum is gone. And I'm not saying you have to replace like for like, but I think one thing Liverpool fans will probably, if they didn't already know, and I'm sure they do, is Wijnaldum was available all the time.
Yeah.
He could play in any of those positions in the midfield three. If you wanted him to sit in the 6th role or play as one of the eights on the left or the right, he could do it. He was always available. Whereas you look at some of the other players, Jordan Henderson, Fabinho, both had injuries last season. Thiago took a while to get going. Number 6 role wouldn't suit him as much as it did when Fabinho came back in and he was given more licence to roam. So you'd think central midfield and also maybe one attacker, unless, is this their way of trying to say maybe we're not going to sign an attacker, we're going to try the Ox in that position?
Or is that one of those things that Alex Ferguson used to do and Mourinho used to do? They'd play a player completely out of position just to show the club's hierarchy. Look what I have to work with here. I've got to play Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain as an out-and-out. We all know he can't do that.
And in fairness, it's not as if he's an out-and-out striker with that role. You drop into midfield, but as I said, it's a little bit different for him because he's going to have to drop in and play with his back to goal at times. Where it's something I know you've talked about on the show as well before with Trent Alexander-Arnold playing in midfield.
Yeah,
like just different roles. Like you get less time on the ball. So it'll be interesting.
Trent's still a kid, though. I mean, by most standards, you would say at this stage, is he 23?
22 is
right.
In my head, anyway.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely somebody who has not yet reached their full potential, and so maybe he is going to have a career as a central midfielder. We look back and go, wow, isn't it amazing that he started as a right back, but he ended up being one of the great central midfielders in European football. Because that's there for him. And it's there for Liverpool if they decide that's what they need.
Yeah, I personally, I don't think they do because he gets on so much ball as a right back. I don't think it's an issue. Another player I should mention as well, Harvey Elliott, played in the second game. And yeah, he gave the ball away a few times, but there's a buzz when he gets the ball. What
position is he playing?
Like he played on the right-hand side of the midfield 3. So you obviously had Salah and Mane and Oxlade-Chamberlain there. And you had Elliott and Naby Keita was playing as well. Milner was there. But yeah, when he gets on the ball, he just looks like things are going to happen. And I don't really see the point in loaning him back out to a championship club. He's too good for the championship. So do you loan him to another Premier League club this season? If you do, like he's good enough to play in a team in the Premier League, I think, in the top half of the table. If you loan them to someone in the bottom half, they play him. What happens when they're in a relegation scrap? Do they think, nah, I need some more seasoned pro to be able to throw the ball into the mixer?
Well, exactly. If your job is at risk, are you going to trust the kid? Actually, it turns out historically, trusting the kids is your best way of avoiding relegation. Phil, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers. We'll have more from Phil a little bit later on as well when it comes to deal or no deal. It is 7:58 if you want to get involved. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Or, of course, you can always leave a comment in the YouTube stream. We're going to hear from... we are going to hear from a couple of big stories for you. Olivia Mehaffey is going to join us to talk us about her career. And we're also going to talk hurling with James Skehill next.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
To me, you need your best line-out caller. So if I was picking a team, I would 100% have Ian Henderson. I think he's the best line-out caller there.
At times it's becoming farcical, and you have to really feel for these players and management. This isn't normal in any shape or form. This is not a Lions tour as we know it.
I don't agree with it. I think it's the wrong decision. It's harsh on Johnny Sexton. Another kick in the teeth.
For the best Lions coverage this summer, subscribe to the OTB Rugby podcast stream on the OTB Sports app.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Auto Mower.
Auto mower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Auto Mower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
It's bang on 8 o'clock. If you want to get involved this morning, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180. Rebecca Clancy from The Times joined Joe Malloy to look back on an eventful Silverstone British Grand Prix at the weekend as Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen clashed. Here's a quick clip.
we've seen it in the past, haven't we, as drivers who take out their championship rivals to win a race. It's not the most, sadly, uncommon thing. When they do that, they do it in the full knowledge that they're taking themselves out as well, and that's how they end up winning the championship. If you can imagine driving at 100 miles an hour and trying to hit a car, your rival, let's say, with, a pinhead target, getting it right while travelling at that speed, in the hope that you take them out without taking yourself out, it's basically impossible. There is no way that Hamilton could have judged to make contact with Verstappen without having done damage to himself. It's remarkable, really, that Hamilton didn't go out of the race as well. And actually, because the race was red flagged after the collision with Verstappen, Hamilton had damage on his car, but the race was stopped almost immediately. But Hamilton, by that point, had already been called into the pit without that. And if the race had just continued and the red flag wasn't necessary, which had been brought out because there was so much damage to the tyre wall that Verstappen had slammed into, Hamilton probably wouldn't have actually been back in the race. But it was only because the race was stopped that the mechanics were able to fix the car and send him back out again. So he wasn't doing himself any favours in this either. What Red Bull... On Sunday, there was a lot of emotion, as you can imagine. Christian Horner was probably more than a little bit concerned about his driver. They've spent a lot of time together. It's quite a sort of father-son relationship. His man was in hospital, and that's quite a frightening prospect for Horner. There's also the added tension as well that, quite frankly, Mercedes and Red Bull, they hate each other. And Toto Wolff at Mercedes and Christian Horner at Red Bull, they don't particularly like each other either. And it's kind of been bubbling for a while, and this incident we saw has just tipped it over the edge, and we're sort of getting the real... Well, as you say, I can't wait to watch Drive to Survive. We'll get the really what happened on in the background.
Yeah, so that's Rebecca Clancy of The Times there. That full interview is coming up at 9:30 this morning with a full rundown of the incident and the off-track drama from the British Grand Prix. Some amazing audio as well that they were playing where you could actually hear the team principals complaining about what had happened and blaming each other to the race director, which we'll play for you at, as I said, at about 9:30 this morning. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Let's turn to hurling, because what a weekend it was and what a weekend we have in store as well. James Skehill is with us. James, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, guys. How are you keeping? You good?
So let's start with the Limerick performance and the Tipperary performance, because I'm really interested in how a swing like this happens in a match. And now that the dust has settled and we've got a little bit of time to digest what happened. A couple of things. What did happen? How were Tipperary able to be so dominant in the first half? What do you think happened in the dressing room? And how the hell did Limerick pull that performance out in the second half when they looked like a completely different team?
Yeah, first of all, it was a great game. I think it was one of the best games I've actually ever seen in my life. You know what I mean? It was a super game of two halves. Tipperary implemented their game plan from the off, let's say, so they got the ascendancy. They were winning the arm wrestle from the first minutes the game started. And, a big thing with Tipperary was they were winning their own puck-outs. Normally when Limerick are in the ascendancy in games, they're winning the opposition puck-outs and they're playing a game within the games on their puck-outs. So they chose to go along a good bit, and what they were doing was they were winning an awful lot of their own breaks. So you'll see that when Hogan was hitting the ball, it was travelling in excess of 90, 100 metres. It was a great puck-out. So what Tip were doing was they were positioning themselves in positions that they could come on to breaks. And they were putting people left and right and in front of the breaks, so they were kind of creating chances. Hence how kind of the two goals came about. So when the ball is travelling, it's travelling in the air for probably 4 to 5 seconds. So the Tipperary guys were positioning themselves about 20 odd metres away from where the ball was going to land. They knew it was going to land. It was going down the middle. It was obviously signalled by Hogan. And then you just see the likes of Bubbles coming through like he did for the goal. He was positioned 20 odd yards away from where the ball actually landed on the puck out, got the break, and he was through because he was coming at pace. And I think what happened in the first half, Tip were just, everything was going well. It was probably the best half of hurling they had since the 2010 second half when they beat Kilkenny. And like it's when things will go well and there's fist pumping and there's chest pumping, you need to make hay when the sun is shining. Do you know what I mean? You need to get as far ahead as possible. And I just think at half time what happened was Paul Knurk got his hands on the Limerick team from a tactical perspective. John Kiley got his hands on the Limerick team from probably a motivational, mental perspective. And they just kind of fixed it up. So what Limerick came out is they came out an entirely different team from the setup. They forced the game within the game for the puck-outs, so that when Hogan did go long, Limerick got numbers around the breaks. And when you start winning the breaks, again, you forced the game within the game. You made Hogan go short in for puck-outs. And that's how Limerick's score came about. So you see Hogan had to go short. They turn him over. Gillan then drops off, which was an excellent piece of in-game knowledge to say that 9/10 of forwards, when that play developed, would get sucked into the play to try to win the ball. Gillan backs off and creates a space for himself, creates an opening for himself, which then becomes an easy pass from Hegarty. And, the shot was a great save from Hogan, but there's Flanagan again, poached with the goal. I just think Limerick fixed their defence and got numbers around the breaks. They fixed the opposition puck out and got numbers around the opposition puck out breaks and forced them to go short and then turn them over. And then they had Keane Lynch. Keane Lynch is probably, now I haven't been around to see them, but I think as it stands right now, Keane Lynch is probably the best Limerick player ever, and his ability to, he doesn't play in the present, if that makes sense. He kind of plays in the future. So he is analysing the game ahead of everybody else. He's a step ahead. And like his ability to kind of motivate himself to get to a position or get to a pass, get open for a pass is unbelievable. And like he's just, he was a huge reason why Limerick turned it over.
Look, there's loads in that, and we'll tease through some of it, but let's just luxuriate in Keane Lynch for a moment. Explain to me a little bit about how him playing in the future works. What when you see it, what does it mean?
There's a book called "Be the Best You Can Be in Sport," and it's by Paul Kilgannon. And in the book, there's a chapter where he talks to Paul Kinnerk, and Paul Kinnerk talks about self-talk. He calls it self-talk, whereby you're in the game and you're motivating yourself to get to a pass, or get open for a pass, and get into a piece of space to offer an easier opportunity for your teammate to pass the ball to you. So, like some players, they'll stay where they are. The ball will come down between themselves and the opposition. It's a 50-50 ball. I just see Keane Lynch. He's looking around himself the whole time, trying to find a pocket of space to give himself an easier pass, and he's always there in support. So he's like a phase ahead, maybe a phase or two ahead. So that's why you always see him on the ball, always. Like it's rare you see him get turned over. It's rare you see him get dispossessed, because he's always creating space for himself. He's two-sided. He's such skill. So like he's I would feel that Keane Lynch is in the game. He's in the moment, and he's kind of always looking around him. He's tuned in for 75 minutes to see how can I put myself in a better position to turn over, to get the ball from my teammates. He's never involved in any fracas. He's never involved in any kind of off the ball or in kind of shoulder and that kind of stuff, bravado stuff. He's always looking for the ball to take the team forward. And like that now, as I said, when things go well for you, it's easy to do the things right. But when things aren't going well for the team, that's the hardest time ever to keep motivated, to keep the head in the game, because all you want to do, the devil on your shoulder is telling you just to give up. And so when Limerick are still 10 points down and he's dragging the game out, dragging it out, that's him in the moment, self-talking himself to get to a future phase. So he's trying to create something for the Limerick half-back line midfield. It's exactly what he did. And you see Will O'Donoghue and Gareth Donovan and Declan Hannon found him with how many link balls. And who was the man that passed the ball to Kyle Hayes? He was down in his own 45-yard line, passed the ball to Kyle Hayes, opened up a channel, and we saw one of the best goals ever.
It really was one of the best goals ever. Like, it was as good a thing that you'll ever see in any sport at any point in any of our lives. It's a remarkable thing. And as I think Eddie Brennan did a good bit of analysis on it. He was like, look at Glan's run. Glan runs towards, taking out Paddy Marr, who all of a sudden has left this big hole behind him. And then it's like, uh-oh, the Red Sea has parted.
Yeah. It's just, it's terribly hard to articulate, in the sense that Gillan does this. He opened up a channel for him, and like people watching the game will obviously be absolutely honed in on Kyle Hayes watching the run he's making, but they don't see the rest of the Limerick guys just creating a dummy run, if you like to call it that opens up, as you said, the Red Sea. Do you know what I mean? And Kyle Hayes has a free run through on goal. That's his second time to do that now. He did that against Cork as well before half time in their first game. The only way to stop him, if I'm honest, right, is tripping. Just foul him. When he gets the ball back his own half-back line and he sees open country, knock him down. That's it. Just knock him down, take a card, and set off again. Because that kind of goal, just that's a huge hammer brush to Tipperary. And once that goal went in, that was it. They were never coming back.
I was making the point, though, that every time he gets the ball in the half-back line now, that's a clear goal-scoring opportunity. So if you do take him down, technically it should be a sin and a penalty.
Yeah. Oh God, we won't go there again.
No. Okay, so can I just ask about Gillan not starting? Like, is that an error on Limerick's part in retrospect, and one that maybe if they lose the game, everyone's like, what the hell's going on? Or, when you win, every decision you made was perfect and everything worked really well. So, like, what's the truth in that? Do you think John Kiley is looking at himself going, I got away with that a little bit?
There could be numerous reasons why he got dropped, or why he wasn't starting. One, it could be solely on form. It could be solely on form that Graham McGahey was completely out of form in training. And, some managers, I'm not going to speak for John Kiley, but for me personally, you need to be performing in training. You have to train to play. So if you can't produce this in training, you can't produce it in the game. And I wonder what kind of form Gillan was coming into during that process. And then you don't know what happens. Could there be an off-the-field issue? Could he have missed, some sort of a physio appointment? Something small could have turned John Kiley towards Graham McKay. But I do think, let's say, halfway through the first half, he was itching to get him on. But you can't bring him on too soon, because that could, impact the confidence and the overall team morale of Graham. Because if you take him off after 10 minutes, 15 minutes, that could essentially be his own year finished in mentally in his own head, because he essentially could be wondering what service could he offer to the team. So bringing him on close to half-time was probably the right call. But then when he came on, he just offered so much to Limerick. He's a threat on the high ball. He's a threat for creation space. He's a nightmare to mark for the shooting, because he can shoot off either side. He takes on shots that, sometimes I was saying, why did you shoot that? The next thing goes up, So he's one of the top class forwards. If you look across Limerick or across nationally, and you put people in the top class bracket, there's probably only 7 or 8 forwards nationally that are in top class bracket, and he's one of them.
Yeah. So it's I don't think he's going to miss the start of a game again for the rest of the year. Now, who knows? Maybe John Kiley sticks to his guns and goes, well, the starting team I'm not sure. You'd expect him to start the next game, all right. So from Limerick's perspective, is there any danger in having peaked in a Munster final? We've seen before, Munster champions don't always win the All-Ireland. There was a long period of time there where they didn't. Is there any possibility that actually what's happened now is all of those changes that Connacht made, all of that tactical shift, the opposition are sitting there watching the video going, okay, well, we actually do have a man marker who's going to be able to mark Cian Lynch. We have somebody who's going to stand on his toe metaphorically and get under his skin, and that's how we're going to beat this team. Is there enough, or is there enough time for anybody who's out there to build a team to beat this Limerick team for the rest of this season?
I think this year there's not. I don't think anyone's going to beat Limerick. I think in previous championship years where you had a good long break between games, you would have some chance to create a bit of pattern of play, or create a game plan that could take them down. The fact that the Limerick are going to go in now with essentially a break, we're actually classing 2 weeks here as a break, or 3 weeks. That's how strange it is, because the championship is so compressed. A big thing for me is that when Tip were going well, everything was going well. I mean, everything. So it was a bit like a boxing match whereby the heavyweights were going boxing, and Tip were landing all their punches, everything, and Limerick wouldn't fall down, and Limerick came back and knocked them out. And I think that's going to do, I'm not going to say irreparable damage, but there's an awful lot of damage now done to that Tipperary team, because they threw absolutely everything at Limerick, and they didn't come up trumps, and they were bowled over in the third quarter. So after throwing their best punches, and that's nearly a repeat of what happened in the 2019 Munster and the Munster Championship. So, for Tip themselves, it's very hard how they see how they come back against Limerick. I think they'll be hoping to God someone knocks Limerick out and they get someone else in an Ireland final if they get that far. And for everybody else, there is a blueprint of a pattern of play there for them to copy. The only thing is, it's a high octane, high energy, huge success rate of passing has to go right for you before you can turn over Limerick. And you look at the game, first half, Tip, every single ball is going to hand. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. Breaks are landing their way. The scores are coming for them. They're getting opportunities through on goal. Limerick don't concede goals. Some said they don't score goals, but they don't concede goals, and they conceded 2-3. So I don't think that's going to happen again. So again, the game was good for Limerick. They won the Munster final, but Connacht and Kiley will be looking at it going, right, what actually happened? What can fix? So when they have time to actually fix their own issues off what the pattern of play Tip developed against them, they're going to get stronger, I think. And I don't think motivation is a question or complacency with this team, because I think their leadership and their management is second to none.
It seems like history is a motivation for them, making history and continuing to drive standards in the way that it was for the great Kilkenny team. Because, I remember we did a show down in Kilkenny and had one of the former Kilkenny players on who was like, look, if we win or lose, it doesn't really matter. This is Kilkenny, we're going to win All Ireland at some point. That's not true for this Limerick. That's not the era in which they grew up in. But it's going to be the case now for the next couple of years that if you make that Limerick team, like the Dubs, you're almost guaranteed to be an All-Ireland contender, and that has its own internal momentum when it comes to driving standards and just inspiring people. Yeah,
it's like you become part of one of the cogs in the wheel, one of the links in the chain. Like when you go into, you mentioned Dublin there, when you said about, like, for people coming into that team, they had Jim Gavin, let's say, over them. They had a plethora of players who had huge standards, winner Ireland. So if you're a young guy coming into that team, there's no messing. You're either in or you're out. And if you're in, you're all in. And if you're out, like, you're no loss. So I think with Limerick at the minute, they're going through a fantastic purple patch. Like, I remember Ollie Canning said it before at one of the Irelands for Portumna. He said, we understand. He said, we have a generation of players here that are few and far between and they don't come around. So we're trying to win as much as we can, as fast as we can. And they came through with 6 or 7 county cycles for Ireland. I get that sense from Limerick. They have 3 months titles in a row, a couple of our Irelands, and they're trying to win as much as they can, as fast as they can, because they know they will be clipped someday, and taken down. But it's just, can they win as much as they can? And I see every young guy that comes into that panel now is conditioned. He's ready to play. So there's a couple of guys that captain that came in. He said he's doing the leaving cert. He looked about 25. The size of him. He's a huge man. So every player that's put into that group knows. Not alone have I a chance for success, but for me to remain in the panel, I have to be in the best condition physically and mentally to even contribute and stay there. So I think they're in a kind of a golden era. Now they've won 2 Irelands, but I think, like, with Limerick the way they are, with the age group, the age profile, and if they keep the management group in place, you could be looking at 5, 6. That's what they're capable of winning Ireland.
It's funny, Kieran Carey was on the show and he compared them to Dublin, saying they're ready to do a 4 in a row or 5 in a row, and people were like, but actually, you know what, I can see exactly why he would have been confident like that. And the other thing is that they've had their Donegal moment, like losing to Kilkenny in the All-Ireland semi-final a couple of years ago, which, in retrospect, if they were supposed to get a 65 at the end of the game, if that had happened, it would have been a draw, it would have been extra time, who knows what the hell would have happened, like the aging Kilkenny team versus the rampaging young Limerick team, who bets against that? But that setback, I'd say, was like a massive blow, and it prevented the complacency that other great teams have had.
Yeah, fully agree, because sometimes you need to take a massive step backwards before you can go forward. And that game came at a good time, because it came at a relatively young, early stage in their whole journey. So, like, that was only on year 2, you could say, of their kind of their rise towards greatness, if you want to call it that. And, like, if it happened now, I think it would be much more detrimental to them than it was back then. It was a good thing. It put them on the road to success, and it taught them more so than anything, because if you win a game, you win, and if you lose, you learn. So they've obviously, they lost that game, they learned an awful lot from it, obviously in game, of a complacency issue and of how to start off a game, and it set them on the road, And then you look at the team profile, they've got a great leader in Jack Buchanan, who just oozes class, to be honest. They have a great management side, and they have a squad that are full of energy. 73 minutes gone on the game the last day, and they're still running around like March-ears. The sun didn't affect them whatsoever. And it just looked like the Tipperary were tired. And the Tipperary type of guys the Seamus Cannon, the Jason Fords, when they're getting the ball, it looked kind of laboured, trying to turn and get away from Limerick, where Limerick just kept having energy. Look at Peter Casey towards the end, Pat Ryan. They just kept having energy. And I can't see how anyone stops that energy, because they'll remain in the condition they're in, as long as they keep the heads focused,
Well, let's talk about some of the other contenders who are still alive. Clare are really interesting in that definitely some people were like, Clare are one of those teams who will pose a completely different challenge to Limerick. But let's talk about Clare as a team on their own. What did they do against Wexford that allowed them to get off to that great start? Was part of that Wexford's inadequacies in terms of how they lined out, or in terms of how they competed for the ball? What caused that? That game wasn't over, but it was essentially the winning and losing of it was those first 15-20 minutes.
Yeah, I think Wexford. Remember last week I spoke about responsibility for the player, and what I mean with that now is during the game, let's say Fitzy was up in the stand for the first 12, 13 minutes. Okay, so he essentially left Wexford to their own device on the pitch, and it completely went awry. It was backfired. I was down with the game. I didn't see any in-game management at all from any Wexford player. Tactically speaking, I didn't know what was going on with their puckouts, because they basically had Foley and another cornerback, let's say, inside their 45. Clare regressed. Wexford had three guys in the middle, and they sent off their wing backs, but the puckouts were going short. The wing backs were shooting up the wings, and the ball was getting turned over, let's say, inside their own 65. So they were actually -2 defenders. It made absolutely no sense whatsoever for what they were trying to do. And Clare just absolutely pounced on it. They got, how many scores did they get in the first 15 with penetrating runs through, having overlapping numbers, because Wexford down a couple of defenders, And again, similarly, we talk about the breaks in the Tip Limerick game. That's how Cathal Malone got his goal, And they just Clare were far hungry. You got the sense that they were really ravenous. The way they were going for the ball, hunting the ball. The Clare crowd, I think, that they deserve to be applauded too, because of the lift they gave their team. when a free was won, Clare were shouting. When a point was going over, they were going crazy. And when the goal went in, they lost their minds entirely. So and they gave great energy to the Clare guys. But it was just there was, I think it was tactical inadequacies, especially from their own puck out, because Clare got an awful lot of primary position and secondary position off the Wexford puck out. It was an element of work rate that Wexford didn't go toe-to-toe with Clare whatsoever. They just kind of lied against the ropes and tried to take every punch from Clare, and it didn't work for them. And then it was a case of just energy. Like when things will go wrong, it's that if your energy level's at 100% at the start of the game and you keep getting blow by blow because your system isn't working and the opposition is getting run, your energy drops off and you become lethargic. That was the story of the first half, really.
And how did they get back into the game then?
Well, your man came down the sideline and he started roaring and shouting and trying to G up, lads, like whatever. But I think every team has a purple patch, or could have numerous purple patches in games. Clare's purple patch was obviously the first quarter. I think the water break came at a great time for Wexford. They got to they rejigged their structure a small bit and kind of went more orthodox and puck outs. And they stopped messing inside in the middle with trying to get short passing. And they got Cathal Dunbar on the ball. Cathal Dunbar got shot 5 points from play, let's say, and did wonders for their shooting. And they got a roll. They got a roll against Clare, and then they got energy. I talk about you can see the team and say when you get a point or 2 points or a couple of points in a row, your energy levels increase, your adrenaline increases, and next thing it's like a snowball effect. It gets bigger and bigger. You know what I mean? And Clare didn't stop it. They didn't try delay it, try stop it, try start a row, do something just to break the whole chain of play for Wexford. And half time came too soon for Wexford. They could have kept going because Clare were again. They had put so much into the first quarter. They were lacking the energy in the kind of the last 10 minutes. When O'Keefe got the goal, they hit 6 points after that, 5 of which were unanswered, and they just they got a good run. Their purple patch was excellent, but that was it. Then they kind of petered out. Now they did win the second half by 2 points, but essentially the damage was done in the first half. And I suppose that last goal was more of a consolation goal than actually minimising the margin of 3 points.
Yeah. Gerlach Nan suggested that from Wexford's perspective, this was in his column at the Star at the weekend, that it's time for them to get somebody else in. He was talking about Eddie Brennan being somebody who would be perfect for Wexford. And, further to the conversation we were having the last time, the importance of somebody understanding your culture and coming from within your culture. It's notable that Wexford's greatest ever success had a Wexford man at the helm. So maybe they don't need another outside manager. Eddie Brennan did a really good job at Laois. So maybe he is right. But is it time for that group of players to have somebody else calling the tune and inspiring them on to what's next?
100%. 1,000,000%. Absolutely, because they've won 5 out of 15 games in 4 years under tenure. And in those 5 games, there were 3 of them were against Carlow, Offaly and Westmeath. They've only beaten Dublin and Kilkenny, top tier opposition. And Kilkenny was the Leinster final. So I know I'm being a bit disingenuous here, or a bit negative, but put the Kilkenny game aside for a second. And has his tenure been a success? No, hasn't. Do you know what I mean? So it's time for the players. They need a rejuvenation, because every time they go out of the championship or knocked out or beaten, let's say, they're always beaten comprehensively. They're always beaten by. I know 3 points was the last day, but it felt like 6 or 7. When they got knocked out against Clare last year, it was 7. When they got beaten by Galway in the Leinster Championship last year, it was 8 or 9. And I just think that the Wexford players, they deserve more. They deserve to be rejuvenated with a new manager, with a fresh impetus, a new tactical approach, more energy, more positive energy, and see what they can get out of it. Because you're looking at guys, Colin Donald, Lee Chin, Matthew Hanlon. How long do they have, let's say, at a top level? Because the age gap is coming down the whole time. So how long have they got left? And if you have a golden generation of Wexford players, you want to utilise them as best possible for success. So I think they do need a change. Is an in-house change with the Wexford person? I don't know. I think Eddie Brennan would be a great shout. I think he did a great job at Laois, and I think the work he actually did with Laois transferred over to their performance this year against Waterford. And that can't go unsaid. So to answer your question, yes, a change is needed in Wexford.
Okay, there was an interesting point you made there about not being able to stop the purple patch, and it kind of speaks a little bit to what happened in the Tipperary game as well. Andy McEntee, in the aftermath of the Dublin Meath match, was lamenting the fact that a couple of the Dubs seemed to be very badly injured at one stage. They were down in the ground. He wished them well in their recovery and hoped that they would be okay afterwards. It was clearly tongue-in-cheek. He was making the point that Meath were on a roll and Dublin very smartly managed the game, or its gamesmanship, or its blatant cheating, depending on your viewpoint on this, but every good team in history has had a call or a signal to say, right, we're up against it, we're under the cosh, you go down there, I'm going to go down here, the referee's going to be a bit distracted, and we're going to buy ourselves a bit of breathing space and a bit of time to think our way through this. Did Tipperary could they have done that to stop Limerick in any way? Or
absolutely. They should have done the old one with the take off the helmet and pretend you're contact lenses. They should have done that one off the end of a play. So if Limerick had a wide or a score, especially a score, goalie, take off your helmet, go down on your ground, pretend you've contact lenses. Lie down, do something. Anyone out the field, just start a fight. Start a row, start something, and transfer energy from Limerick over to something else. You know what I mean? Because when a team is on the tendency and they're looking to close a gap, they want everything to go at their pace, which is 100 mile an hour, because they're clutching for time. They need time. When a team is trying to do the opposite, you want to go in slow-mo. You want for everything to go really slow, puck outs, free, sidelines, and try to frustrate the opposition as much as you can. So I understand what Andy McEntee was saying, but we're jumping right to do it 100%. Go down, just do something. And every team does it. And if a team says they don't, it's absolute bull. Every team does it because they understand under the cosh and they've got to stop the rot, because things are rotting too badly. And the same with Tipperary on Sunday, they just needed to do something, And I just say that at home and I say in the club, just do something. If that's, I don't know, just tackle the fella, pull him down for some reason, no reason whatsoever, and just see what can you transfer energy from Limerick over to something else, you know what I mean? Even take a referee's focus and kill a minute or two of the game and kill a minute or two of the half,
Is this something that you would have talked about when you were playing, or is it actually, I guess it has to be learned, right? No team is born with this in them. The game smarts, the management of situations, part of it is experience, part of it is coaching, and it's just making sure that somebody within the system is thinking that if this scenario arises, and it will at some point over the course of the season, we've practiced it, we've spoken about it, we've understood exactly, okay, this is what we're doing. And, with the Dublin football team, for example, there's the famous kick-out where Mayo have the ball on the tee and 5 separate Mayo players are dragged to the ground by their opposite number by the Dubs, and Dublin win the All-Ireland, and afterwards nobody really speaks about it. But it's an amazing piece of concerted thinking by the Dublin forwards in particular to prevent Mayo from getting a quick kick-out to get the ball back into play. And I think ultimately the kick-out ends up going over the sideline anyway, so it was a wasted opportunity. Yeah. But, that team was bloody smart, and that's why they're going for 7 in a row this year. Is that something that when you were playing with Galway, those conversations would have happened?
Yeah, I think even you go back way further. Every team, you'll plan for this, so you'll have days where you're facing a team that you're kind of up against. You mightn't exactly have the same, balance of power that they have. So if you were, for example, playing Kilkenny in the mid-2000s or the early 10s, they had a better team than everybody. So you don't want them to get a roll, you have to stop it. But it's one thing planning for it and talking about it pre-game or in training, but to actually execute it, and for the player or players to have the in-game, smarts to do it under pressure. It might sound like actually a small thing, just take off your helmet or lie down or something. But to do that under pressure and not conform to the actual game, for the ref to blow on the whistle, come on, pick it up. The umpire is telling you, puck it out, you know what I mean? For you to actually sit down and lie down, it takes experience, it takes a bit of balls too, you know what I mean? Because you're risking a throw-in, you're risking, a free against you or whatever, do you know what I mean? Or you're risking time added on. But you're right, it comes with experience, it comes with probably a senior member of the team doing it, whether that be in the goals or out the field. And it's terribly important to break momentum, because we touched on purple patches there, Ger. When a team has a purple patch, you've got to stop it. You don't let teams actually don't realise they're against a purple patch until they've 3 or 4 points scored against them in 5 minutes. You know what I mean? And at that stage, then you want to completely stop. You don't want that to keep going for 10 minutes and have them score 8 or 9 points. So there's a lot of in-game, thoughts going through. And it goes back to my point about Keane Lynch and the self-talk. It's huge in a player, and nowadays players, especially senior country players, is they'll understand what's going on in the now, and they understand that when teams have a run, we've got to stop it. We've got to kind of bring it down. So the good teams, like the Dublin, the Limericks will do it as well, I guarantee you. And the Galways and Tipperary should have done it, and you see what didn't happen to them. But it's not something you practice, sure. It's not. It's something that you're taught since a young guy. And it's just having the balls to do it in real time.
Yeah, and you talked about that swing, and just thinking about it now, haven't seen as big a swing in a match, except you guys in 2012 in one way, where the trilogy of games you have with Kilkenny, there's a swing from the first game where you are absolutely dominant to the third game where they're absolutely dominant. What happens? How does the balance of power shift so spectacularly?
A couple of things. I think on the first game you were probably referencing the Leinster final in 12, and that was it was probably an element of complacency from Kilkenny too. We were 7-1 to win the game, so there was no public expectation whatsoever. So we were starting at the bottom of the barrel, and we just came out and just blew them away and just saw the game out. The game was at a different stage then as it was now. So there was no huge long range shooting. There was no 30 points. So let's say if you relatively kept the goals out, you were going to see a game through if you're up by 7 or 8. And then let's say in the first game of the Ireland final series, we should have been up 6 at half time. We committed a couple of fouls. We actually went in 3 up at half time, and then it was just like Kilkenny were beginning to turn the wheel. And at the end of the first Ireland final, we got a draw to snatch. We got a free to snatch a draw, and you could just feel the energy was going and the balance of power was shifting towards Kilkenny. And like once you knew that as a Galway person, as a Galway player, it's very hard to stop. Do you know what I mean? Because we had succumbed to defeats from Kilkenny from a lot of years previous, and I think Kilkenny got that too. They smelt a bit of blood and they finished off the job on the second hour emphatically.
Is there something now, if you could go back and explain to the team, knowing everything you know, that would be able to change that from the replay from the drawn game to the replay?
Yeah, I think it's opportunities. Like we had an awful lot of shots in the first All-Ireland whereby they were probably taken sort of rashly. They could have been phased better, let's say. And this is me looking back in hindsight now, which is easy for me to do. But there's a few shots, 5 or 6 that come to my memory, and that if there was just an extra pass or extra 5 yards ran, the opportunity would have become much easier. We could have tacked on a point or two more and probably even closed the game out. We didn't concede a goal that day, but we kind of let Sheffield run riot a bit. You know what I mean? I think we should have probably tactically changed up things a small bit and see could we cut out his influence. And he references it too as his most influential performance in Kilkenny jersey, which is it's hard enough to hear. You know what I mean? But it's true. So just face the fact that was his best game. He said he had for Kilkenny, and you felt that in time, which it was so hard to stop. You know what I mean? So hard.
I guess that's the thing that makes Cian Lynch and Shefflin is that we know what they're going to do. The whole world knows it. The whole world has a plan to try and stop it, and yet nothing you do actually ends up being able to stop it. You said
it a moment ago when you were on about is there a blueprint to beat Limerick, and you said can we mark Cian Lynch? If some guy marks Cian Lynch for 70 minutes, he's going to get sent off. He's going to get sent off because Lynch is going to keep moving. You're going to keep fouling him and dragging him. That's why John McCormack had to go off him because he's going to get sent off. You're going to commit repetitive fouls. So you just can't. You know what I mean? And we could have stayed fouling Sheffield all day that day, but someone's going to get the line then. You know what I mean? It's just when they're in that groove with that caliber of player, it's easy to say we man mark them. That's the easy thing to say. The hard thing to do is can you cut off the supply to him entirely? That's the hard thing. That's where teams should be focusing. Is instead of focusing on Cian Lynch, you can try to limit his influence as much as you can with their runner beside him, but can you stop the ball getting to him? That's the real key. Stop him.
Okay, I spent a good bit more time on some of that stuff, but it was really interesting. What's the story in Galway? What's the sense? How is the team going? What do you think is a likely outcome at the weekend?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask me that. It's radio silence in Galway. I haven't heard a bit from any player. It's gas. I think it's business. The Dublin game now is well and truly forgotten. I think they left the shackles over the last couple of weeks in training. They're primed to go now. I think there's a bite about them. I think they've obviously drawn Waterford. They're going to come through Waterford because it's going to be a kickback off the Dublin game, and this is the game where they're kind of going to set a record straight. I think they're going to come with huge energy. They're going to come with the real aggression, that they didn't show against Dublin. They're going to take scores early, and I think they're going to see out Waterford. Galway for this game are probably in a good place. It's what worries me looking down the line is the roll of games coming so soon against top level opposition. If they come through Waterford, they'll most likely face Tipperary because they faced Dublin already. If they come through Tipperary, they'll most likely face Limerick. You know what I mean? As they come through them, they could face a Kilkenny type team. So from now to the Holy Grail is going to be a very, very hard quest. But I think just from step one, take it day by day, and I think just go at Waterford, hit them with everything you have to say, and be aggressive, be upfront, and the rest will take care of itself.
Okay, it's interesting because that's kind of what you said would happen after the Dublin game. We asked, what will training be like, and it sounds like it was exactly as you've expected.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it was never going to be a walk in the park, and they're just going to put their hands around each other and say it'll be fine, it'll be all right. It's not going to. Like, you have to kind of fix it. So we have a problem. The problem was evident against Dublin. A couple of problems. They're well spoken about. They're well analysed, let's say, in-house. So now fix the problem. And when you do all the training to fix this problem, the only way you really put it to bed and fix it and put the Dublin game behind you is go out and hit Waterford hard. That's the only way you do it. You know what I mean? And that'll really put to bed any issues that you've had with Dublin. That'll confirm that what you've done in training worked. You know what I mean? And that the guys are back in sync again. They've a bump on the road, obviously, and they're off the trail a bit. Now the Waterford game is a perfect opportunity to come back on.
And the Clare Cork game, did Clare carry everything that they have, and does that give them an advantage against Cork, or I just don't know where Cork are at the moment. It's the great unknown of the Irish sports summer.
It's extremely hard to tell. The forwards aren't firing. Patrick Horgan's not firing. Harrandy's not firing, and you're wondering, let's say, where the big score is going to come from. Clare are going to bring energy from the off. How much energy they have is the big concern for me, because they've effectively. I know they haven't, but it's nearly like 3 weeks. It's nearly like they're playing 3 games in a row, if you get me, even though, in 3 weeks. So it's, if Cork can, I suppose, keep Clare at arm's length for the first 15 minutes, that'll go a long way to Cork winning the game. You do want to give Clare a tendency from the off, because you would assume that if you can hit them hard from the off, that their energy levels would drop, that the motivation would drop, let's say, if they're not getting the scores and the fruition that they had against Wexford, and that you could see them off. I'm backing Cork on this one, solely because Cork have had a break. Clare have had to have a couple of heavy battles over the last couple of weeks, and I saw Aaron Shanahan and John Conlon. They were coming off gingerly at the last day. I don't know what kind of damage they've done or have they any injuries. So they're coming out of one battle and into the next one. And I spoke as well about how it's so hard to get up for a game one weekend and then go through the game physically and mentally, come down from that game, put it to bed, analyse it, and get back up again for the next game. That's the big challenge for the players. Physically, you can recover, quite fast with the aid of third parties like physios and water, etc. But mentally, it's all on you, And can Clare wipe the game from last week and get right back up again for Cork and start off where they left off against Wexford? That's the big challenge.
James, good stuff. Brilliant this morning. Thanks a million for joining us.
Well, the foresee. Good day to you.
James Skehill, always brilliant with us here on OTB AM, giving us insight into what's going on really in the world of hurling at the moment. It is 8:38 this morning here on OTB AM, brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with our new and improved razors. Loads of stuff that I want to talk to you about. We're going to talk to Olivia Mehaffey in just a moment. Before all that, though, I want to tell you about our brand new Olympic show. We've got the OTB Sports Olympic show starting this evening and running for the next 3 weeks, every day across all of our social channels. On air at 5 o'clock in the evening, we'll bring you the biggest stories of the day and take a look ahead to what's to come. So if, like a lot of people, you're a little bit confused by the schedule, don't worry, we have you covered. We're going to bring you the stuff that you need to watch, stuff that you might have missed, and some brilliant guests and analysis from people on the ground in Tokyo and family members back here. All sorts of brilliant guests lined up for you over the next 3 weeks. It's all brought to you in association with Indeed, who are proud to support Team Ireland at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. 2021. Indeed believes the world works better when people are given every opportunity to unleash their true talents, and the hashtag is Talent Unleashed. Now, let's move on, because we're going to talk about rugby a little bit later on, and we're also going to talk about transfer news. But in the meantime, let me talk to you about this, because former Ireland and British and Irish Lions scrum half John Robbie joined us on the show last night to talk about the controversial 1981 Irish tour, as well as this year's tour, and how he became a talk radio DJ in South Africa. Here's a quick taste of that chat.
Yeah, I think that I definitely knew. And in fact, funnily enough, there was a meeting held. I think the 1980 Lions was probably the first rugby tour where there weren't just rugby journalists following it. There were journalists from the newspapers who weren't really interested in the rugby, and some of them, maybe from the tabloids, were interested in stirring up a little bit of controversy. And I remember there was a meeting, there was an article written by one of the newspapers saying that the Lions are unhappy. And so we had a big meeting with the Lions, and Sid Miller was there and said, I've heard people are unhappy. Is there anybody who would consider not coming again? And I put my hand up. I was the only one who put my hand up. And even that, because it leaked out, etc., caused a little bit of controversy. Now, in hindsight, in the same way as Willie John did in '74, I would guess Sid Miller asked the team at the beginning of the tour, if anyone's going to pull out, do it now. We don't want people pulling out halfway through. But of course, I was a replacement on the tour and would have missed that instruction at the beginning. So even then, if I'd be totally honest, I knew the situation was wrong. The problem was that again, as the documentary said, business was flourishing with South Africa. There were all sorts of other links with South Africa that were going on. Therefore, why is little old rugby, which is doing its best to bring about multiracial teams, not doing bad things, visiting townships, charities, etc., why is rugby being hounded? So, of course, that was an argument that many people had, and I could have and probably did punt it. But deep down inside, I think I knew, and again, I've said before that one day, it would come back to haunt me, which is now. But all I can do is be honest and say that, I was a young kid, rugby mad, etc. I knew it was wrong, but anything that I did in those days, rugby came first. Absolutely. Yeah. That's the way it was, which is bizarre considering it's an amateur sport. But in a funny sort of a way, maybe it was more of a passion because it was amateur. The thought of going training rugby, like going to the office today, I think would take the magic out of it for me. So like many old fogies say, I'm glad I played in the era that I did play.
Yeah, always really interesting to hear John Robbie talk so openly and honestly about the mistakes that he's made in his life. But he goes on, obviously, to have an important broadcasting career in South Africa as well. And I think he has more than made amends for that. So you can hear that full thing on the rugby strand of our podcast. Just subscribe, get the OTB Sports app, stick on your notifications. And every time that we update you with a podcast, we'll ping you a little notification to let you know. You don't have to turn on the notifications, by the way. It just is particularly helpful. When we're doing good stuff, we'll let you know about it. And we promise not to be too annoying about it. But yeah, so that's John Robbie. You can hear that full interview, as I said, on the rugby strand. Search OTB Rugby wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to that. It is 8:42 this morning here on OTB AM, and I'm delighted to say we're turning our attention to golf. Olivia Mehaffey is with us. Olivia, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, good. What part of the world are you in at the moment?
Currently in Northern Ireland.
Very good. And there's a tournament coming up there next week. Is that right?
Yeah, big one next week. Galgorm and Mazarine starting next Thursday.
This is a pretty special tournament. It's got a 50-50 split for the men and women. It's a fairly relatively new initiative. It's happened over the last couple of seasons where there have been these tournaments, but it's a quantum leap forward for the game.
Yeah, it is. It's huge. To be part of this is very special, especially playing at home. And I think that's, anytime you're playing an event that's kind of, challenging the current boundaries and pushing barriers is very exciting. So I think it's very good for us to tee up with the guys. I think the guys enjoy it, and it should be a good event. So hopefully we get weather like this and get some good crowds out there. Yeah,
if the weather's like this, it's going to look like the nicest golf course in the world.
Exactly. People will be wanting to come to Ireland for their holidays.
Yeah, how bad? Come here, listen, talk to me a little bit about, you've just recently officially finally turned pro. It's been coming for a long time. What's that transition like? Because you've known, I guess, since you were a teenager, that your destiny was to become a professional golfer, to finally get there. What's that like from a psychological perspective? Is it freeing? Is it like, okay, great, I've made it this far? Is this where the pressure feels like it's at its most? How are you dealing with that?
It's been very exciting. I kind of did, I think, 8 weeks on the road there and threw myself off the deep end, and a few people telling me that I should maybe take a wee break and slow down, and I think I've learned that. But it's been exciting. I've been waiting for this moment since I was a little girl, and kind of feels surreal that it's finally here, and it's very exciting. And it's just a completely new journey, a new chapter, and kind of learn as much as I can now while I'm in the early stages. That'll hopefully help me for a long career. But it's a lot more golf than amateur golf. You're organising a lot more things yourself with the team around you, and you've got that bit more freedom. But definitely still enjoying it, and just trying to learn as much as I can while I'm still a young pro.
Yeah, so in terms of what your own markers were for those 8 weeks, is it literally just about making sure that when it comes down to teeing up that you feel as good as you possibly can? Is that your kind of... Because I guess at this stage, if you feel like you're enjoying your game, you're going to perform well.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, I've got a really good team around me that help with that, you know. My agents, my coach, everybody's trying to take the pressure off me to just go out and play golf and to perform to how I am capable of performing and how they know I can perform. So, just kind of learning all these things now. And I just want to go out there and still enjoy it. I know it's work, but work now, but it's not a bad job to have. So just trying to enjoy it and really take it all in and learn as much as I can now before hopefully I'm on the bigger stage. Tell us a little bit about when you were growing up and the dream of becoming a professional, because obviously I think people who have had a tangential understanding of rising names in golf, yours was always one of the ones that got mentioned about a future star. So there would have been expectation, I suspect, from outside as well as inside. When did you realise that turning pro was a realistic option for you, and when did you realise that you were going to be good when you turned pro? Well, I mean, I started when I was 6. I've always played, family play, grew up, and I was very competitive with my brother and always trying to get my handicap lower than him and beat him. So, that was a lot of my childhood, and kind of started playing international more tournaments when I was, I think I got my first Ireland Cup when I was 13, so I was quite young on the team. Like, I remember going to a tournament and losing a tooth on the way there, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, this girl is so young, what is she doing here? So I had kind of those memories growing up. So from a young age, I was kind of already put on a big stage, learning to travel without my parents and kind of gain that independence. So I think from that age, I really fell in love with the game, and I knew I wanted it to be my career, and I've been saying it for years and years. So I think I kind of knew, when I was 12 or 13 that I want this to be, my whole life. So from a very young age. So were you playing for the senior Irish international team when you lost a tooth? The girls team, right. So the under 18 team. And then I think I got my first cap for the ladies team when I was 15 or 16. So still pretty young. Because I was searching my notes for this, and an email popped up from 2014 where you were meeting Nick Faldo. It was the Lochern Invitational Challenge. And I was like, you've obviously been on the circuit quite a while, despite the fact that you're a newly minted professional. This has kind of been your day-to-day existence now for a long time. Yeah, for sure. And, I've had a couple of setbacks. I broke my hand, and then obviously COVID. So, I could have been, I really wanted to turn pro maybe a year ago, 2 years ago. So just kind of being pushed back. But I'm kind of grateful for that time, because I feel like I'm a little bit more ready now. I've matured a lot more, and, kind of ready for the demand that is, because, people think it's this glamorous life, and it's not, it's living out of a suitcase, booking flights last minute. Am I getting into this tournament? Am I going here? And all of that kind of stressful side to it too. So it's not this lavish lifestyle of private jets that some people seem to think it is. Not yet, not yet. We'll give it a couple of years and that's going to happen. A few more years and maybe that'll happen. Is Royal County Down your home club? Was that the first club that you were a member of? I first joined Tandragee. I lived just 5 minutes away, and then joined Royal County Down when I was very young. So I've been very lucky to have the support of both of them from a very young age. It's obviously something specific about the quality of golf course and coaching and competition that kids get exposed to early in that small portion of the world that has given us so many amazing golfers. What's your take on why that little corner of Ireland is so spectacularly successful when it comes to the international stage? Yeah, I remember, growing up, I was always very encouraged. I felt like they wanted me to be there. They took me under their wing. I remember going on Saturdays to Royal County Down, and the ladies were delighted to play with me. And I'm this little 9-year-old kid probably running around the place, and that's so nice for them to really welcome you in. And I don't know if golf's that accessible everywhere else, where they do really take you in and they want to see you do well. And I remember they were teaching me so many things. I feel like I grew up and I turned into the girl I am today because of them, and I matured a lot. So I think that's very good. And then obviously there's a lot of good players, so that competitive aspect. I remember being at Ulster coaching and Ireland coaching, and that really brings you up, and it's nice. You can go out and you can play with the girls, and you have all those good players to play with, and I think playing with players better than you really helps kind of bring you on. And so you obviously are particularly talented as a teenager, and at that point the option of going to the States, was that automatic in your head? Was that always clearly the best pathway, was to do the collegiate thing in the US, or was there any possibility of going pro before that? What was your thought process then? Well, at that time, I think I was about 16 when I was deciding, and I decided that I wanted to go to America for 2 years. I was like 2 years and then turn pro. And I knew I wanted to go out there because I wanted to get used to being away from home, living away from home, and also the golf courses over there. I wanted to get used to the different types of rough, the fast greens, the slopes, that side of things as well. And I knew my end goal was the LPGA and to play in America. So that I thought prepared me best for that stage. So I went over there and I was like, I'll do 2 years, I'll turn pro, and then away we go. And I went over there and I loved it. I loved everything about it, and I worked my butt off in school, and I was like, I'm not wasting not having a degree for the sake of 2 years. So I decided to stay for 4 years. And then COVID happened, so I took a 5th year. So I went from wanting to do 2 years to end up doing 5 years, and I'm halfway through a master's now. And if you told me, 5 years ago that I would have a degree and halfway through a master's and I would have done 5 years at Arizona State, I would have told you you're crazy. So it's just funny how everything works out. But I think that time's been very good for me. It's nice that you're very sheltered in amateur golf. You're not on the big stage yet. You're not getting all that attention. You're not getting criticised or ridiculed for anything you do. So, it kind of allows you to grow and develop as a player a little bit more under the radar, which is quite nice.
What are you studying? I
got my degree in sociology, and I'm halfway through a master's in organisational leadership.
Okay, right. So there's an alternative life for you as well, which a lot of times with professional sports people, they get so laser focused that actually when the bad times come, there's nothing for them to think, okay, actually, you know what, I can work my way through this, because if it doesn't work, I have a fallback position. And that kind of, particularly in a game that's so psychological as golf, not having that safety blanket can conversely actually end up being really bad for you. Is that something you were conscious of and have become conscious of recently?
Not so much. I did it because I wanted to, but when I look back, and if it was to give advice to the younger girls now, I would be like, go and do it, because even now, the team around me, we're very careful with who we align with and, what sponsors, and I have amazing sponsors, and, I'm so excited to go and do days for them and to go and help out with the kids, or to do talk about diversity and inclusion in the workplace, that kind of thing. I never really thought I would use my degree, and I'm using my degree now about, I can think about classes I've taken where that's really going to help me to go and do those talks. And I think, it's finding things that you're interested in off the golf course too, because it just becomes way too intensive. You're just, golf. So it's nice to have that kind of break, and you think what you are passionate about, and you get to enjoy that side of things as well. Whereas I don't think, before I would have had any balance in my life, say, and that's kind of opened up a whole new, side where I have that, away from the golf course as well, which I really like, which is the side I totally never even thought about.
Yeah, and you can see exactly how it would benefit, particularly in a sport like golf, where there is so much corporate interest and so many opportunities for you off the course, assuming that the game is going well. So last question, how is your game going at the moment?
It's been good. I've played well since I turned pro, and it's just nice now to have a week at home. I've been, as I said, on the road for 8 weeks now, so just nice to kind of reset and focus and get back to practice and get working on my game again. But game's good, very excited for next week, so should be a good week.
Well, listen, we wish you all the very best. Congratulations on turning pro, and thanks a million for joining us this morning, Olivia. Cheers.
Thank you.
It's Olivia Mehaffey there, one of the newest names which you'll be hearing a lot in our sports bulletins, and hopefully we'll talk to her again as the season unfolds. It is 8:53 this morning. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Up next, we're talking to OTB's resident South African Stephen Kisbey-Green ahead of the Lions versus South Africa. Here's Tyg Furlong talking about what he expects from the Test series.
Yeah, it's big boy rugby, isn't it? It's top end rugby, and as a front five, it's a very good barometer where we're at.
And just from your own point of view, not alone can you prop, but you can now run pretty fast and pass as well. Is that other parts of your game that you've been working on for the last while?
Yeah, I remember during lockdown there was a lot of Lions game on. There was a lot of Lions at 2017 tour on, and you kind of look back and you think of, I'm not doing a whole lot in the game. You're working hard, yes, you're kick chasing, you're working hard on the inside and defence, but there's not a whole lot much more going on other than the set piece and trying to hit rucks hard. And I'd like to think that, I've added a bit more to my game there, and I'm certainly not there where it can be with some of the aspects of my game, but I think that's part of a rugby player, isn't it? You're always trying to push it on or drive on and get that a little bit better.
It's Tyg Furlong talking about what he expects and what the future holds for him. Time for us to do something that we've been trying to do for a little while. Stephen Kisbey-Green is with us this morning. Good morning to you, Stephen. How are you?
Morning, Joe. How's it going?
Yeah, pretty good. So we were doing recently a look back at the last time that the Lions were in South Africa with Brian O'Driscoll on, talking about the 2009 Test Series, one of the biggest abominations in the history of world sports, Stephen. And there you were tweeting about how this was the greatest event you've ever been at personally, and how Morningstain's kick was the best thing that's ever happened to you in your life. So look, you know, I just figured that we should tease this out a little bit. I mean, how could you possibly be proud of the violence that your nation inflicted upon the Lions that day?
Well, hang on. Let's think back 2 seconds. Yeah, it wasn't just the South Africans that had a bit of violence. If you will remember, I think O'Driscoll mentioned it himself a while during that chat. That hit on Donny Rousseau was a bit illegal as well. So that series in particular was a very, very physical series, and to be honest, it was the highlight of what South African rugby was at the time and is currently now. And that is just pure and utter brute force, but not... obviously, Schalk Burger's eye gouge, definitely illegal. But for the most part, most of those hits for the day were genuine, actual hits that were perfectly fine. And the Lions just couldn't handle the heat.
Well, if Berger had been sent off in that first minute, which he should have been, which the whole world thinks he should have been, including, I would say, Berger at this stage, having a nice little route around Luke Fitzgerald's cornea there, just to make sure that it was still all, sorry, it's breached now. Once that, look, it's one of those great sliding doors moments in world sport. If he gets sent off, I've no doubt that the Lions win that test, because the performance that they put in that first half was absolutely sensational. And then that third test could have been one of the great sports experiences of all time. That's Razzie giving you a call there just to make sure that you're toeing the party line here.
This has been going on for morning. Like the Lions probably would have won that match if Berger was sent off. But the difference that kind of proved the fact that sort of helped South Africa win was just that physicality in general, and the fact that at the end of the day the Lions couldn't field the fully fit 15. I mean, when you have Ronan O'Gara coming on in the centres and then getting absolutely brutalised as well as the moment he came on, it's difficult to maintain that dominance that you've had through the 60 minutes. The Lions dominated that first half scrums in particular, which was something huge for South African rugby at the time. When you got beasts going backwards, that never happens. So not being able to field a strong enough scrum in that second half was monumental for the Lions and Springboks. So you can argue, yes, the Lions probably would have won if Berger went off in that first half with a red card. But odds are the injury still could have occurred, and
it's true.
The Springboks would have then taken over the physical stakes that weren't in the scrum. Look at it. The line-out was still dominating with Victor Matfield. You can't beat Victor Matfield in the air. Nobody ever did. And in Brian Abana on the wing, scoring that try, getting the box back into it. And who can argue whether or not the Lions would have won? But what you can argue is that if Morningstein had started, I don't think the match would have been that close at the end anyways.
Because Ruan Peter had missed a lot of kicks in it, which probably gets airbrushed a little bit from the history as we re-watch it. You're in the stadium that day, is that right?
Actually, not. Unfortunately, not the Loftus test. The third test, the one in Ellis Park. I remember, but I do remember vividly that moment watching from home in Boksburg.
What does the Lions tour mean to the rugby fan in South Africa? Why does it energise them so much? Why is it so important?
It's kind of weird. I equate it to like winning a World Cup, in that you build up for so long for it, and then by the end of the day, it's over in the blink of an eye, and you've either won or you've lost, and that determines how you are looked at by those particular people for the next 12 years. I mean, you just have to look at all the talk leading into the 2009 tour after 1997, where everyone was basically rubbing dirt in the wound, and this is 12 years of pain for the Springboks and all that sort of thing. It does eat at you if you have lost that series. And in particular for a South African rugby player, like Andre Pollard mentioned it during the week as well, the Lions come around for a South African once every 12 years. And the opportunity to play against the Lions is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for most people in the Southern Hemisphere. So to be called into that squad, to be given the opportunity to play them not only once, but potentially twice for Morné Steyn and for Francois Steyn, it is something special. And for the fans, it's basically an invading force. Okay, this year is a little bit different because you're not bringing the Red Army with you. It's just the playing squad. But in a usual tour, the amount of fans that come through to support the Lions is literally an invading force. So the entire country sort of galvanizes and supports their team and sort of tries to back out this invading force that has basically usually runs rampant across the provinces, as it has done this year. And it's a unifying factor more so than any other incoming tour. Like, say, for example, if Ireland were to come to South Africa, it's slightly different because Ireland don't bring that huge number of fans, and
you generally beat us anyway. You don't really care, right? It's not a rivalry. You don't need to patronise us here, Stephen. We're grand.
Well, fair. But I mean, it's just it is that special thing that happens. It's so rare that it comes to South Africa. It's like once every 12 years. The next time it'll come to South Africa, who knows? Well, South Africa might, with what's going on in the country at the moment, South Africa might be under a completely different set of circumstances.
Can I just bring up one time that you didn't just beat us, which was, funnily enough, brought up by Razzie this week, where he took a clip of Brent Pope talking about how South Africa were a rabble. We were 14-0 up at half-time in one of the November internationals. I can't even remember what year it was. Is it 2017? Is that right? Maybe it's not. But what is Razzie doing? Trolling Irish media to find any little bit of somebody saying something negative about South Africa and then tweeting it. Why is he engaging in these tactics? What the hell is going on?
He's responding to Warren Gatland, calling out Rassie for every little thing that he does.
But the clip of Brent Pope was so unprovoked. It was so weird. And like I was looking back, and I think I didn't check the score, but somebody in the Twitter feed underneath it says we beat you 38-3. I actually don't really remember that, to be honest. But that's how much of a rabble that team must have been, and maybe the rest of their players weren't playing. Maybe it was in that period before they had decided, well, maybe we should just pick our best players. That might be the best thing for South African rugby if we pick our best players to play for the team.
I personally don't remember the scoreline there, but I do remember it was a fairly handy beating. That was also the year that we lost to Argentina for the first time. At home for the first time. And yeah, that was when Rassie had just taken over the position, starting to build in. That was a particularly bad time for South African rugby. But
so he's using this as a motivational tool to remind everybody about how far they've come. Is that it?
Exactly. The players that Rassie brought in after that, and even I think during that Test match, most of this team that's playing on Saturday was there as well. They know what it feels like to be humiliated by what we would call a lesser team. And let's be honest, South Africa do see the Northern Hemisphere as a lesser team, and that's because in history has proven that against South African opposition, they do tend to lose.
Yeah, and it's true. Yeah, it's just a bold statement of facts. That's what you're giving us here.
I mean, statistics are not in the Lions' favour. Another thing that dragging up the past, everyone's considering South Africa undercooked this year. They're no more undercooked now than they were in 2009. If you think about it, 2009 they had one Test match against Namibia. This year they had one Test match against Georgia, and they still came out and physically beat up the Lions. I don't see it going any other way this weekend.
Do you think they're going to absolutely annihilate them physically? Because there is this sense that South African rugby is fairly one-dimensional, that it is absolutely about the fact that for whatever reason there are bigger human beings born in South Africa who are good at playing rugby, and so therefore they lean on this and crush the opposition. And then, you know, maybe there are some flair players, one or two sprinkled across the team traditionally, who run up the score. But ultimately the decision is based on who wins the fight, and your forwards tend to win the fights.
Well, yeah, but you mentioned they're physically bigger, and I don't actually agree that South Africans are physically bigger. It's not size that makes them more physical than everyone else. I mean, I wrote an article for Off the Ball a couple of weeks ago, basically just analysing the different pack weights and heights and physical sizes of different players. And New Zealand, France, Australia, even England, they all have bigger, physically massive, more massive players than South Africa. In the 2019 World Cup, when South Africa dominated the English scrum and pushed them back 5 weeks to Sunday, the English scrum was heavier by at least 50 kilograms. But the difference is that the South Africans are born, or are bred, not even born, but they're bred to never accept that you're tackled. So for somebody like Dwayne Vermeulen, for example, he gives up 14 kilograms on a Billy Vunipola. He's 14 kilograms lighter than Billy Vunipola, but he will be more dominant in the hit because he refuses to accept that he has been tackled. He wants to drive through. And that's what all South Africans do. It's bred in, I mean, Andre Pollard mentioned it as well, as to why he thinks that South African rugby is a beautiful game. It's that from 1 to 15, you do not accept that you're tackled. You always want to either hit the shoulder or take the gap and just power through, leg drive, and physically try and break through the defense. And so, and because we've been bred up with that from an early age, it just carries on, and then we add more muscle to that, and then you get somebody the likes of Eben Etzebeth, who has got a little bit of Bucky Spuiter in him, and causes a little bit of fight as well.
Yeah, the rest of the world doesn't really have any characters like Bismarck du Plessis, for example. He seems to be one of a kind, and yet almost every Springbok team that wins the World Cup seems to have a busy in there somewhere.
Yeah, it's we do enjoy the term enforcer. Even in high school, there's always that enforcer that tries to rile up the opposition. It's a little bit like what the All Blacks do with their scrum offs. But the difference is when the scrum offs try and make you want to hit them, they run away. When Etzebeth or Bismarck or Bucky's make you want to hit them, you don't want to hit them.
That's true. So tell me about the high school tradition of the enforcer. So every team would have one, and their job would be to rile up the opposition?
Yeah, it's basically you doing everything you can within the laws of the game to just irritate the opposition. Sort of like what Mario Itoje does. You just go a little bit offside, but just onside so that you're fine. You put in a slightly harder hit than you need to if the ball's already gone, but you've already committed. It's if somebody scores something, or if somebody is celebrating a big scrum victory, you get up in their face and you push them back, and you sort of make your physical presence known, and then it's an idea that they will second guess running into you again. And then if one person won't want to be run into, then they'll try not to run into everyone else.
Do you think that this part of the world is a bit mad, making the Lions slight favourites for this game this weekend?
Yes, I do. I don't think that the Springboks are nearly as undercooked as advertised. Granted, the couple of players have literally had zero training. They've come out of quarantine on Sunday, so they spent the past 2 weeks literally playing Xbox in their hotel room. But if that rumored leaked 15 that was announced, or that was leaked last night, is anything to go by, I don't see that Lions pack being a huge problem for the Springboks. Even with Kwaka Smith, who's not your typical South African eighth man, I genuinely think that I don't think it'll be a huge margin, but I do think South Africa will win this first test. Where it goes from there, though, I've got no idea.
All right, Stephen Kisbey-Green, thanks very much for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Cheers, Joe.
That is the view from our South African correspondent here on Off the Ball. And I would have to say I'm a bit concerned too about the not just the league team, but the fact that this whole notion, they're undercooked, the Lions are favourites against the world champions who seem to have one of the best coaching tickets in the history of the sport and who are gifted with world-class talent throughout the team. Let's wait and see what happens, but I don't know. I wouldn't be too certain of a Lions victory this weekend. We're going to bring that match live on Saturday's first test. We're bringing you the whole 9 matches. We've done 6 so far, 3 big ones still to come from the British and Irish Lions Tour of South Africa. Our Lions coverage is brought to you in association with Vodafone, lead partner of the British and Irish Lions. It kicks off at 5 o'clock. There is pre-match, there is post-match. You'll get it all on Off the Ball on News Talk. Brian O'Driscoll alongside Neil Tracy on commentary duty for that one. We're going to be back in a moment with this morning's Deal or No Deal.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The football pod with Paddy and Andy.
The opposition can't smell blood this year. We're as well pack it in, because even if Cumberford's kickouts are as good as Cluxton's, every team is taking a step forward.
Download the OTB Sports app and subscribe to the GAA podcast feed now.
Have you subscribed to the OTB Football podcast? If not, here's some of what you've missed over the last week.
I didn't want to be part of the homecomings back to Dublin when we got back from Korea back into Dublin. I just wanted to get away from things.
Get yourself on YouTube and just put their plays on a loop. The violence that they tackle with is just absolutely brilliant.
Well, so far you've heard my voice, but then I brought 2 friends along. Next on the mic is my man, Ger. Come on, Ger, sing that song.
David Myler.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts and download the OTB Sports app.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it. What have I done? Like I walked into a circus. It's amazing, isn't it?
Today's edition of Deal or No Deal, Will O'Callaghan and Phil Egan. Oh, not just once but twice. Phil, good morning to you again. Will, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads. Good, yeah.
Okay, so according to the Mirror, Paris Saint-Germain want to buy Manchester United midfielder Paul Pogba and think they can sign him for a fee in the region of £50 million sterling. The Manchester Evening News reports there is yet to be contact between the clubs about this potential move. The current deal runs out next summer. Is it time for Manchester United to part ways with the World Cup winner, Phil?
I think if you're Paul Pogba, you should probably try and get out, because it doesn't matter what Paul Pogba does at Manchester United, he's always going to be criticised. So if they won the league, say they go and win the league this season, I don't think they will, but say if they did, and Paul Pogba was unbelievable, then the criticism that would get thrown at him after winning them the league would be, oh, well, he's been here since 2016. What took him so long?
No. If he wins the league against this Man City team, I think they would start talking about him the way they talk about Cantona. It's like the end of a mini famine. I mean, obviously it's a much shorter famine this time than the one that Cantona ended. I think that, I see the point you're making, right? In the one weird, fluky, bizarre world where they win the league, he has to score 17 league goals. Not penalties, right?
Yeah, well, look, the better the team around Pogba, obviously, the better he's going to be. So you look at the team that he arrived to, and obviously Mourinho was in charge, and, it's not really set up for Paul Pogba to thrive in.
No.
And by the end of the Mourinho reign, he's left on the bench for Mourinho's last game at Anfield, and then Solskjaer comes in, Pogba plays, then more rumours that Pogba wants to leave. Solskjaer handled it pretty well. He comes into the team last season, starts playing pretty well, had a decent Euros. Now, I don't read too much into how he played at the Euros, because international football and the Premier League are completely different. I would liken it to when you played Tetris as a kid, and it's all well and good putting the blocks in when it's at the slower level, but when it starts speeding up and your mind is racing, like in the Premier League, it's tougher. And I think Pogba suits the international style where it's a bit slower. That's why he was really good in Italy. But look, I think there's always going to be a place for Pogba in the United team. But what I'm saying is that maybe it's not the worst if they can get him off their books, and for both player and for the club.
Okay, so this is a win-win.
I think so. The only thing is that fee. United be looking at that fee thinking we could probably get more, couldn't we?
I don't know at this stage, can they? Like, he's not worth 100 million anymore? He's not worth 80 million? Who's going to pay that? Who else has the money to take his wages on?
Well, you know PSG, if PSG are coming to buy off you, you could probably ramp up the money a little bit, which clubs do to United all the time.
Yeah, there's a PSG tax, there's a Man United tax. There's probably a Real Madrid and a Barcelona tax still, and they're still paying them as well. Will, what do you think? If you're a Man United fan, are you still, I mean, I remember the phrase was, we would drive him to the airport. Is this a drive him to the airport scenario?
I don't think so, Jared, because I think United fans have probably changed their opinion on Pogba a bit based on the second half of last season. Like when his agent was in the media coming around to December of last year, it seemed like they were more than happy at that stage to go, look, Paul Pogba is missing far too many games. Paul Pogba is not showing up for United. If we get a decent fee, more than happy to allow him to go. Now, at this point, I think Pogba had a good second half to the season. He's had, with the exception of the mistake that he made, which almost directly resulted in France being knocked out, I thought he had a pretty good European Championships. And at this stage, like 50 million is a pretty derisory fee, considering that PSG have been splashing the money so far this summer, signing players like Donnarumma. They've paid, like, I think 80 million euro for Hakimi just a few weeks ago from Inter Milan. And you're signing the biggest superstar in French football to the biggest club in French football. You would imagine that United can hold out for a fee that's a lot more than 50 million. Well, the issue is now the contract situation, whether Pogba wants to sign a contract himself. Like, he's walked out on the club previously when he allowed his U-term deal to run out when he went to Juventus on a free transfer. How loyal is Paul Pogba to Manchester United and Manchester United's development towards, as Phil mentioned, trying to become a Champions League contender or a winner of the Premier League? I would think that United are quite a distance away. Does Paul Pogba want to give 2 or 3 more years of his career to sticking around for that project, or does he look to move to an elite European club? PSG, I'd imagine, lads, is the only option right now, because the other teams who potentially would like to sign him are all stone broke because of the pandemic. There's no way Real Madrid, Barcelona or Juventus can sign Paul Pogba for a reasonable fee this summer.
And I would argue probably not even the following year after that. So for Manchester United, there's a little bit of a game of chicken going on here, Phil. It's the fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. If he runs down his contract a second time at Manchester United, then that, I mean, in fairness, you would have to say his agent is properly a super agent, and Harry Kane could have done with somebody advising him along those terms a couple of years back, because Harry Kane would actually be a free agent if he hadn't signed that last deal right now. So what do you think will happen here, Phil? Well, what's most likely?
I think what's important as well, on top of that, if he does get to that stage of his contract where he's running it down, then that just creates problems for United in terms of it's always going to be brought up. And if something doesn't happen this summer, and if he doesn't sign the new deal, then it's going to be asked to Solskjaer all the time. It's going to be asked to Pogba. Any closer to a new deal? These are things that always tend to crop up after a bad result as well.
Yeah.
When things are going well, you know, it's like, I'll sign the deal whenever. Like, you know, you're just having a good time or winning. You know, everyone needs to relax. But as soon as something goes wrong, then it's like, you know, they haven't tied down Paul Pogba, or where does his future lie? So these are things they could do without. I think, as I said, I just think if...
From Christmas, he'll be able to sign a pre-contract deal with somebody.
I think that if they get... Say, if they could get it up to 60 million, I think you take it and everyone's happy.
Yeah.
And Pogba goes to PSG, and look at the team he's going to be playing with.
54 million sterling is what Transfer Market has his current market value at. I know that's completely made up, right? But they are tracking this, and I don't know. Get him out. I'm saying, get him out. Take the money and run.
Take the money, and do you know what? If he's there at the start of the season, you have a really good player. So it's just really, I'm thinking further down the line and the problems it could cause.
Who do you replace him with?
Well, I mean, I think United need a whole new midfield, because McTominay and Fred ain't working. I think they need a really top central midfielder so they can actually change the formation. Jordan Henderson won't play now. He's still sore after what Fergie said about him.
What about Declan Rice?
Yeah, Declan Rice is a player that, unfortunately for Declan Rice, he's probably going to get priced out of a move, because this is why it made sense for Declan Rice to play for England in terms of what it would do for his future. So there's talk of about 80 million for Rice.
Right.
If he was an Irish international, He's half that.
Yeah, that's actually not good for Declan Rice, though. That's good for West Ham.
Yeah.
That's good for his agent, who gets an agent's fee. It's not good for him because he doesn't get any of that 80 million.
No, but
he would actually be
able
to.
He also, he playing for England as well. He did get to play in a European final and go to a major tournament. So it's been a good choice for him. But I know what you mean, and I think there is certain English players that are going to get priced out of moves. I think Jack Grealish is another one. Now, I actually genuinely think with Grealish, I think he just loves Villa, and actually what Villa are doing at the moment is exciting. They have money, they're on the up, and Grealish probably looking at this going, yeah, I'm quite happy here. But it's a nice excuse to have that teams will not fork out more than 100 million for the likes of Jack Grealish. Would you pay 80 million for Declan Rice if you're Manchester United?
Maybe. I mean, ultimately, it's Manchester United, the money doesn't matter. The wages matter more than the money in some ways, because that upsets the ecosystem in the dressing room. How much the transfer fee was is largely irrelevant, although Harry Maguire struggled a little bit. He's kind of come good in terms of the quality of performance that you would expect from him. The other thing that we need to talk about here quickly is Raphael Varane, who it says hopes to secure a move to Manchester United in the coming days. This is one of those very long, drawn-out transfer sagas that the longer it goes on, the more concerned you might be.
I don't know. Varane seems at this point, lads, that he is actually quite interested in leaving Real Madrid. Like, it's going to be such a new era for them, given that Varane and Sergio Ramos have been their central defence for so long at this point. Like, both are there for 10 years plus at this stage. But all the soundings in the Spanish media over the last couple of weeks is that Varane fancies the idea of going to the Premier League. It seems that Manchester United are the most interested in signing him. Real Madrid need money at this stage to try and reinvigorate their own squad. So I think if United actually come in with a bid, because like all the reports are that they've already agreed to the personal terms that we're at for Varane at this stage, that if they can get a deal done for somewhere in the 60, 70 million, you would imagine this is the perfect signing for Manchester United, who've been crying out for a good central defender for quite some time. Like, he'd be almost a perfect partner for Harry Maguire, given that he would definitely cover up for some of Maguire's shortfalls in terms of his defending. And look, I take Phil's point that they definitely need a better shielding midfielder than McTominay or Fred going into next season. But maybe Rafa Varane, if you get him in, fixes some of the issues, and you can probably play with one fewer holding midfielder in front of the defence if it's Maguire and Varane as opposed to Maguire and Bailly or Lindelof. Yeah, no, potentially, and maybe you can play three at the back, and all of a sudden there's an opportunity to have Pogba work in a system that actually suits his talents a bit more than it has been at the moment. Phil, this Varane thing, you're a little bit sceptical?
Well, no, not that I'm sceptical, but you do worry. You want to see the picture. You want to see the picture of Varane holding up the United shirt and Solskjaer beside him. Because even Jadon Sancho, it's all been agreed, but it hasn't actually been finalised yet. You want these deals to be finalised before you actually believe them. And it is a strange one for Real Madrid that they're going to have Varane and Ramos off their books in the same summer. And, you know, it doesn't really bode well for them. In terms of, it would be a really good signing for United, but as I said, you just want to get it done. And the problem I have with McTominay and Fred, it's never one or the other, it's both. And any time Solskjaer feels like he goes into a game where they have to get a big result, he's always going to pick those two because they give him that bit of extra safety. But for United to push to the next level, safety is no longer good enough. They have to attack. They have to attack, whether it's the Premier League or the Champions League, because they now have to be more active rather than passive. I think they're reactive as well, and that's when United were at their best. Look, I'm not saying that they can get back to those Fergie days, but to get to the next level, they have to start thinking of playing more on the front foot in those bigger games. But Varane would be a key part of that, and I think a really good holding midfielder that can do the job on his own. Okay, we talked a little bit earlier on about Liverpool and potential some changes that they might need to make. We talked, Phil, about in the midfield area. One of the things that Liverpool have been very good at doing is pawning off fringe players to other Premier League teams for what seems like inflated money. Nat Phillips has been linked with a move for 15 million to Brighton. Is this a good deal for Liverpool? Is it good for Nat Phillips? Or actually, is 50 million not enough these days for one of those players who you might need to play 10 or 15 Premier League games? I think it's a good deal. I think you take the money and, yeah, Nat Phillips played 20 first-team games last season, 17 in the Premier League, 3 in the Champions League. But look what it took for him to get that amount of appearances. Like a defensive crisis.
These crises, they do happen.
They do happen, but they've signed Konate now. I mentioned that earlier on. Ben Davis was signed on the same day as Kabak, but Ben Davis is still there. He played in the pre-season game yesterday, and I wonder, has Klopp taken the long-term approach with him? And with Nat Phillips,
take the money,
because if you think about it, if he doesn't play as much, which he probably won't play as much this season, how does his value ever go up?
Yeah.
And I think Liverpool have made mistakes in this in the past. I looked at Origi playing yesterday. If Liverpool had cashed in on Origi after the Champions League win, they could have got 30 million from him. Now he's still at the club, and he comes on and he's not really doing it anymore. He's a bit of a cult hero, but that ship has sailed now in terms of the highest price they could have got from.
Okay. Will, James McLean looks to be on his way out at Stoke City. Had a falling out last year, essentially because he played for Ireland, and this did not go down well with Michael O'Neill. He came back from injury at that point and then didn't play again for Stoke because of the injury. I mean, I think this is something that we should all remember when it comes to him showing up for the Republic of Ireland and the effort that he puts in. But he's being linked with a move to Celtic. Would he start at Celtic? Is he good enough to play for Celtic at this stage of his career? Is it a good move for him? Should he do it anyway and try and force his way into the team?
Yeah, well, you'd be looking at, I would think, James McLean playing at left wing back if he was to go to Celtic, or left back as opposed to playing further up the pitch. It's not that long ago that James McLean had an incredible finish to the championship season last summer, and then the injury against Qatar really dirtied his bib with Michael O'Neill, because it seems that O'Neill had put pressure on for McLean not to link up for that international window at all, and then particularly for McLean to go on and play quite a bit of football against Qatar in a pretty meaningless friendly and to aggravate an existing injury. You can understand where Stoke are coming from here. Like, it's all well and good that James McLean really wants to play for his country, but limited minutes within the competitive games, fair enough. To play in an uncompetitive game and to make that injury even worse means that he's very unlikely to get back into the Stoke team despite the good form that he showed previously. It seems that James McLean is linked with Celtic every single transfer window, and it's never quite happened, but he's obviously very game for moving there. He was a Celtic fan when he was younger. You would hope that if he moves there, it's not like Duffy, where it seemed perfect. You're going to your boyhood club, and this is a chance to play football at what is seemingly a lower level when Duffy was going from the bottom end to the Premier League to go to the SPL. I know there was more factors with Duffy, particularly around his personal life when he was arriving into Glasgow, but I think McLean, if he comes in, would add a lot of energy to that Celtic team. Like, from watching them last night, they're still a little bit light squad-wise. I think if they could get McLean, on a reasonable transfer fee, he's shown that he's still a pretty good championship player. I would imagine he slots straight into the Celtic team, but probably as a left full-back, I would think.
Okay. You agree with that, Phil?
I looking at their bench, the options weren't great on their bench, so he certainly would be a good addition to the squad. And I just imagine James McLean kind of in a Superman role where his Celtic gear is on under his clothes and he's waiting for the call, and then he rips off his shirt and he's got his Celtic gear on. He's like, I'm ready. Yeah, I've been waiting for this for a while. He would love to play for Celtic.
Yeah, and I think he's one of those players he would hope would thrive at Parkhead as well. So, want to talk about this. TalkSport reports that Southampton's Danny Ings wants to join Manchester United and Manchester City. Good that he has dreams, absolutely. Should either club buy him at this point? How would he fit in at a side challenging for the title? Phil, start with you.
I think he'd be more suited to playing for Manchester City because... But he'd have to understand he's not going to be a starter. He's not a starter for either club. And that would be my concern for Ings, because when he got the move away from Liverpool and he started banging in goals for Southampton, that's because he was the starter. He was the main man. You get that rhythm, you get that confidence. You think back to that season where he scored 25 goals, like everything he touched went in. Whereas if you go and sit on the bench and you are called to come on, say, for 20 minutes to go, you got to deliver. And if you don't, then you mightn't get 20 minutes the next time. You might only get 10, and that window gets shorter and shorter, and then you become a player that plays League Cup games and FA Cup games. But if you go to Manchester City, there will be plenty of those games, and you might get dead rubbers in the Champions League as well. So I just don't, he's got to ask himself, does he want to be a regular for Southampton or a different club, or does he want to sit on the bench for a United or a City?
At 3 times the money.
Well, I mean, that will always help, I'm sure.
It's definitely a complicated question. Very quickly, at a 1 to 10, Declan Rice, we talked about Manchester United earlier, but really Chelsea is the one that everybody's suggesting. Chelsea believe that Declan Rice wants to be a Chelsea player and to come full circle. So, will 1 to 10, the chances of Declan Rice being a Chelsea player, 10 being him in the blue, kissing that badge?
I would think a 6. I think if he was available for less than the 80 or so million that West Ham seem determined to hold out for, he would go to Chelsea and be reunited with Mason Mount in that midfield. I think it would be an ideal signing for Chelsea, given that at some point they're going to have to refresh their midfield because Kante, despite his remarkable energy, is not getting any younger. They didn't fancy Jorginho at different times. Maybe they'll reconsider that, though, after his brilliant performances at the European Championships this year. Rice would add a lot of depth to the midfield if he was to arrive at the club. But given that West Ham, their owners are digging in and not selling the club, it seems, this morning, they definitely won't want to sell their England gem in midfield without a huge fee. And I'm not sure if Chelsea are going to go in that heavy this year, having spent like a quarter of a billion even last summer.
I'm just looking at the Chelsea arrivals so far, and these are all players back on loan. So previous loan period just finished at the end of June. Billy Gilmour, we know, has already gone back out on loan, but it's Gilmour, Kennedy, Malang Sarr, Abdul Rahman Baba, Danilo Pantic, David Zappacosta, Matt Miazga, Bakayoko, Marco van Ginkel, Victor Moses, Danny Drinkwater, Tamori and Baker, all still under contract at Chelsea this year. So maybe they're not going to sign any players. Maybe they're going to find some hidden gems in there, and they don't feel like they need Declan Rice because Thomas Tuchel can rescue the career of Danny Drinkwater.
There's nobody in that list that I thought, oh, yeah, he could be worth a shout. No, I think...
Kennedy?
No, he was at Granada last season. Would have played against United.
Under contract till 2024 at Chelsea.
Yeah, no, he's gone.
I think Tamori has gone to AC Milan as well.
Already, has he?
Gone through,
yeah. I think, Kennedy's going to go back out on loan. He'll probably turn up, when you're watching Europa League on a Thursday night, and you're like, oh, that's where he plays now. And then you've got to check that they're still Chelsea players. Of course they are. But Declan Rice, obviously the age profile. He's 22. You're looking at Kante is 30, Jorginho 29, Kovacic 27, different type of player. And also as well with Declan Rice, you know that he can play centre half.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's definitely one of those things that Tuchel would be able to maybe show Gareth Southgate how to use this player a little bit better. Lads, good stuff. Thanks a million. That's this week's Deal or No Deal.
What about your own personal position? Every day the newspapers are saying he's worth £5 million. Real Madrid want to sign him, Blackburn want to sign him, Liverpool want to sign him. What is the position?
The position's simple. I'm on a contract for another season and a half. And I've discussed a new contract at Forest, and if I get the right deal, I'm prepared to stay.
Yeah, and so he did. Oh no, wait, he didn't. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Coming up on OTB Sports Radio today, Leaders' Questions with Stuart Lancaster at 12, Classic Gooch interview at 1, Dublin's Mount Rushmore at 3, our retro panel at 4, and our live Olympic show live in glorious Technicolor at 5 o'clock. Then OTB AM is live on air and online with Wednesday Night Rugby and loads more from 7 o'clock tonight. OTB AM brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Up next, here's Rebecca Clancy from The Times, who joined Joe to look back on a pretty eventful Silverstone British Grand Prix at the weekend as Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen clashed. Enjoy.
Now we're going to turn our attention to Formula One because it's interesting just now, to say the least. The first 60 seconds of the British Grand Prix at the weekend delivered one of the most thrilling starts, I think, in Formula One history, you would have to say. Here is the brilliant, and they were brilliant, this is a tour de force of commentary as well as driving. Here is the Sky Sports team of David Croft and Martin Brundle.
And it's lights out and away we go. Once again, Max Verstappen gets a decent start. Not as good as yesterday. Hamilton is right with him. Leclerc is already ahead of Bottas. Verstappen's ahead of Lewis Hamilton. Going through the second turn. It's the Red Bull, but Hamilton's coming back. Into Village we go. It is Verstappen from Hamilton. Then Leclerc, Bottas and Ricciardo ahead of his teammate Lando Norris.
Verstappen's going to have to weave like crazy. Hamilton got a better drive off the loop. He will be faster down the Wellington straight into Brooklands.
Not going to get a chance to weave because already Hamilton is with them. They almost touch. They go into Brooklands. Verstappen stays ahead. The crowd roar their approval for this. The two championship contenders giving it everything.
It's not over yet, because Hamilton gets another slipstream all the way down the old pit straight into Kopp's corner. These are critical corners for this Grand Prix.
Hamilton's going to try again, this time on the inside, a continent touch! Verstappen is out of the race, and that's a big crash into Kopp's! Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen coming together. Hamilton continues on. Charles Leclerc now leads the British Grand Prix.
Yeah, so extraordinary stuff, an extraordinary start for Verstappen out of the race, a 190-mile-per-hour collision with Lewis Hamilton. So all the team principals are linked via radio to the race director. In this case, it's Michael Massey. And as you might imagine, straight away, Red Bull's Christian Horner was not happy. He was straight on to him on the radio. Have a listen.
Michael, have you got a minute? Hello. Yeah, Michael, look, that corner, he was never anywhere near alongside. Every driver that's driven at this circuit knows you do not stick a wheel up the inside of Kopp's. You know, that's an enormous accident. And it was 100% Max's corner. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, full blame lays on Hamilton, who should never have been in that position. So, you know, you could have had a massive, you know, accident. Thank God he's walked away unscathed. So I hope you're going to deal with it appropriately.
Understood, Christian. That's why it's just gone up now that things have calmed down for a second as under investigation by the stewards.
There we go. So that was Red Bull's Christian Horner giving his tuppence worth. Straight away, naturally, the team principal of Mercedes was arguing on behalf of his man Lewis Hamilton. So Toto Wolff here, he linked in with Massey and he explained that he had sent an email with a diagram which apparently proved Hamilton's innocence.
Michael, this is Toto.
Go ahead, Toto.
Michael, I just sent you an email with the diagrams where the car should be. Did you receive that?
Toto, I don't access my emails during a race deliberately because I concentrate on the race.
Yeah, then you should maybe look at this because there is something with the rules. I'm coming up.
Toto, feel free to go upstairs and see the stewards directly.
So that was Toto. By the way, how good is all this? I mean, football can't even sort out VAR, and here we have like full-blown drama in the middle of this race. It's amazing. So Hamilton goes on to win the race for the 8th time. He is, of course, the 7-time world champion, winner in 08, and then the last 6 championships in a row. And that win for Hamilton, despite the 10-second penalty which he received for his part in the incident, that win meant that Verstappen's lead in the championship suddenly slashed from 33 points down to just 8 points. And Mercedes as well cut Red Bull's lead in the constructors' standings to just 3 points, so down to just 3 points as well. Like I said, Hamilton received a 10-second penalty for his part in the incident. So after the race, here is Hamilton, the defending world champion, talking to Sky's Rachel Brooks.
What a roller coaster ride of emotions. A lot of anger after the shunt with Max, and then
what was that
anger?
Had
to bury it and just progress forwards, you know.
What was your anger?
Huh?
What was the anger?
I just don't feel like he needs to be as aggressive as he is. And, you know, we're going down to turn 6 and there's bumping wheels with me, you know. And but it's cool because there's footage of old Formula 1 great drivers bumping wheels in a straight. And so I'm sure it looks cool and everything. But I tried to give him space. But I was quite a long way up in the inside into 9. And none of us backed out. And that was the end result. But I took the penalty, of course, and it's never one person's fault. It's always a balance of the two. I don't feel anything now. I just channel it into my driving, which I did, and I'm so proud that I was able to do that in front of the crowd.
Emotions are running high at Red Bull. Christian Horner's been pretty outspoken in his response to it. Yeah, and I get that because obviously his driver's in hospital. You know, it was a big shunt, 50G shunt for him. Does it take any? I didn't know he was in hospital. Yeah, he's in hospital now. Just precautionary checks. It's never how you want a race to play out.
Absolutely not.
And therefore, does it take a bit of the shine off it for you, knowing that?
Honestly, no, it doesn't. This is racing, and of course I would love to be able to race and for us to leave one another space, and there is plenty of space on the track for us to get around and manage for a long time without colliding with someone. But when someone's just too aggressive, these things are bound to happen. And there's not a single driver here that doesn't know how aggressive a driver could be. And yeah, there's not really much more for me to say. I hope he's okay, because of course I would love to have a wheel-to-wheel race battle for the whole race. I enjoy racing with him, and I'm looking forward, but I would never back down from anyone, and I would, naturally would not be bullied into being less aggressive. I think today, this weekend, we needed the points, and there was a gap. He left a gap, and I went for it.
So that was Lewis Hamilton. Verstappen is okay, by the way. He was taken to hospital, but he was released that evening. He had a CT scan and some precautionary checks and a bit of stiffness, a bit sore, but he's okay. Final clip for you then. We heard the Red Bull team principal Christian Horner on the radio straight after the incident. Needless to say, after the race, when he spoke to Sky's Ted Kravitz, he was still of the opinion that Hamilton was way in the wrong here.
Down here with Red Bull boss Christian Horner. Well, Christian, what can you say as the boss of your team today? I mean, is that just the way motor racing goes sometimes?
Well, it shouldn't be like that, to be honest with you. I mean, Max has incurred a 51G accident. Lewis Hamilton is an 8-time world champion. He shouldn't be making manoeuvres like that. It's unacceptable. He's put a driver. Thank goodness, the biggest result for us today is that he was uninjured. He's having to go to hospital for precautionary checks after a 51G accident. So I hope Lewis is very happy with himself.
Well, yeah. I mean, what about it did you object to?
Yeah, well, he stuck a wheel up the inside in a corner that you just know you don't do that. You just don't stick a wheel up the inside of Cops in that corner, in that circumstance. He was nowhere near ahead. It was contact, left front to right rear. And the speed that they're travelling is one of the fastest corners in the championship. And, Lewis has got more than enough experience to know that that's unacceptable. And, I hope he's... as I say, I'm just very disappointed that a driver of his caliber should make such a move as that. It's dangerous. He's put a competitor. It looked desperate, and he's put a competitor, thank goodness, uninjured, but he's put in hospital, getting himself checked out. So anyway, there we go.
There we go indeed. Red Bull team principal Christian Horner there, waiting patiently. Rebecca Clancy from the London Times. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, how are you doing?
Very well. How good is this sport right now?
Oh, that was a brilliant recap. I really enjoyed listening to that. It was such a good race, wasn't it? It was so controversial, lots of drama. I mean, we have to say the most important thing is that Max Verstappen is okay, but it was an absolutely brilliant British Grand Prix.
The Drive to Survive producers are just sitting at home saying, you're making our jobs too easy here.
I know, it was funny. I saw the guys at the weekend, actually. I was at the race and I was walking through the paddock and I saw the Netflix guys and just big smiles on their faces thinking, thank you very much.
Episodes 2, 3 and 4 taken care of.
Yeah.
So Verstappen took to Instagram and described Hamilton as disrespectful and unsportsmanlike, and he said he was taken out by Hamilton. What was your read on the incident? The British Grand Prix stewards judged Hamilton to be, quote, predominantly at fault, end quote. Just how far over the line here was Hamilton in your view?
Barely at all, I would say. It's a really tricky one. So it was the first lap, which means all the cars are bunched up together on the track. There's not really many places to go. They're all fighting for position. And often on the first lap, when an incident like this happens, if wheels touch, the stewards normally deem it as a racing incident. I personally view it as a racing incident. Several of the other drivers have come out and they feel the same way. Fernando Alonso, Charles Leclerc, Mika Häkkinen, the double world champion, he came out today and said he thinks it's a racing incident. I thought the 10-second penalty, perhaps it was right, perhaps... if you look at the replays, you can see Hamilton was alongside Verstappen, but maybe he didn't quite turn into the corner as much as he should have done, but then he felt that he had the line. We are talking about things that happened in the blink of an eye. It's all well and good. We can sit here and watch replay after replay after replay, but these guys are judging we're talking about millimetres here in no time at all, really. And so it was a really tricky one. I would err on the side of racing incident, but I if I was Hamilton, I probably wouldn't be too aggrieved by the 10-second penalty, which actually, surprisingly, he wasn't, which sort of makes you think that maybe he thought that he was ever so slightly in the wrong, sort of 51-49% in his direction. So he gets quite grumpy normally if he gets a penalty and he doesn't think it's fair, but he didn't on this occasion. Obviously, he went on to win. But when he was told about the penalty over the radio, he certainly wasn't grumpy about it. He just said, OK, let's get on with it.
OK, because Red Bull are seriously aggrieved. I saw Toto Wolff as well afterwards. He was saying there's a rule in Formula One. Toto Wolff obviously of Mercedes, team principal. There's a rule in Formula One that if the front of your car is more than halfway along the other car, then it's your corner. And Lewis was much further ahead than that, so the other driver should have left him some space. So again, on the face of it, you hear Toto Wolff there and you think, well, that's a compelling argument. But again, like I said, Red Bull so aggrieved. For instance, Max Verstappen's father, not a disinterested party, I grant you, but he did race in 106 Formula One races himself. He said it's really unacceptable what Hamilton did. Max gave him space and was in front of him. You cannot overtake on the inside of Cop's corner. A 10-second penalty is ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. They should have banned him from the race. So you have two obviously very entrenched parties and then a bunch of people in the middle saying, well, maybe that's just racing, a touch of negligence on Hamilton's part. I know Red Bull are considering an appeal, which could result in points deduction or even suspension from the race. How likely is a Red Bull appeal to be successful, do you think?
So I spoke to Christian on Sunday night, and he sort of mentioned it in passing. I don't really think they'll go ahead with it. He wasn't even completely convinced that it was worth their while, really. One thing that Michael Massey did say on Sunday night, and one thing the FIA have been very, very strict on, the governing body who hand out these penalties, they say that they do not judge an incident on the outcome. So just because Max Verstappen ended up in hospital as a result of them coming together doesn't mean that the penalty should be any harsher. They simply judge it on the instant as it happened in that split second on the track. And if you judge it like that, I don't think Red Bull have anywhere to go, really. I think 10 seconds was appropriate for what happened. OK. And on Verstappen's point of Hamilton taking him out, I wanted to ask you how in control of the situation Hamilton could possibly be. Like, I presume once you come into contact with another car at that speed, at that corner, there's a distinct chance you'll not just take Verstappen out, but you'll take yourself out of the race as well. And this is obviously not a situation whereby Hamilton, it's the final race of the year and he's got a healthy lead, so if he takes them both out, he wins the championship. Hamilton needed to stay in the race as well. Or is there any way that he would have known that that type of collision would have just resulted in Verstappen going and not Hamilton? No, you're right. We've seen it in the past, haven't we, as drivers who take out their championship rivals to win a race. It's not the most, sadly, uncommon thing. When they do that, they do it in the full knowledge that they're taking themselves out as well, and that's how they end up winning the championship. If you can imagine driving at 100 miles an hour and trying to hit a car, your rival, let's say, with a pinhead target, getting it right while travelling at that speed, in the hope that you take them out without taking yourself out, it's basically impossible. There is no way that Hamilton could have judged to make contact with Verstappen without having done damage to himself. It's remarkable, really, that Hamilton didn't go out of the race as well. And actually, because the race was red flagged after the collision with Verstappen, Hamilton had damage on his car, but the race was stopped almost immediately. But Hamilton, by that point, had already been called into the pit without that. And if the race had just continued and the red flag wasn't necessary, which had been brought out because there was so much damage to the tyre wall that Verstappen had slammed into, Hamilton probably wouldn't have actually been back in the race. But it was only because the race was stopped that the mechanics were able to fix the car and send him back out again. So he wasn't doing himself any favours in this either. What Red Bull... On Sunday, there was a lot of emotion, as you can imagine. Christian Horner was probably more than a little bit concerned about his driver. They've spent a lot of time together. It's quite a sort of father-son relationship. His man was in hospital, and that's quite a frightening prospect for Horner. There's also the added tension as well that, quite frankly, Mercedes and Red Bull, they hate each other. And Toto Wolff at Mercedes and Christian Horner at Red Bull, they don't particularly like each other either. And it's kind of been bubbling for a while, and this incident we saw has just tipped it over the edge, and we're sort of getting the real... Well, as you say, I can't wait to watch Drive to Survive. We'll get the really what happened on in the background. But yeah, we're really getting to see now these relationships, and that it's not just about the two drivers, and it is about the two teams as well. And why don't they like each other, the two team principals? They're very different people, that is certain, but they also come from two different... Well, they want their own teams to win, really. When Red Bull were winning the 4 championships between 2010 and 2013, they were dominating the sport. Sebastian Vettel was their man, and then suddenly Mercedes come in. They've got Toto Wolff at the helm, and ever since Toto's been in charge, Mercedes have won every single championship since 2014. So there's a bit of, professional rivalry in that sense. But also, we all have colleagues that perhaps aren't our favourite people, shall we say. And we all have rivals, and we all, that's just the way it goes with life. But if you can imagine, within the tension and the pressure of elite sport at this level, that heightens every emotion. And so they just don't particularly get along, and that's great for us.
Just to give people a sense of where this Hamilton-Verstappen rivalry is now. So Hamilton we're obviously pretty familiar with. 36 at this stage. He has his 8 world titles. He's...
7. He's going for 8.
Going for 8, excuse me. So the last 6 in a row...
No, Christian said 8.
Did he? Okay, that was an interesting Freudian slip on his part. So he's won the last 6 and he won in 08 as well. And Verstappen, son of Jos, as we mentioned, who was a teammate of Michael Schumacher's. Verstappen has been the coming force for quite some time now and the great hope of Red Bull. He was 17 years of age when he made his first Formula One debut, when he made his debut in Formula One, which was a record. He was 18 years of age when he won the 2016 Spanish Grand Prix. That was on his Red Bull debut as well. And we've seen other drivers get into that Red Bull car and feel a bit nervous, but he won in his debut. So that was an announcement in many ways. And here he is, a couple of years on, 23 years of age, 15 wins, 50 podiums. And the progress has been very steady. 2017, 6th in the Drivers' Championship. 2018, 4th. The last 2 years, he's finished 3rd. So Hamilton will have known for a number of years, I presume, Rebecca, that this guy is coming for him.
Yeah, absolutely. We've all had an eye on Verstappen for quite some time. He is quite the talent. I would say comfortably that Hamilton and Verstappen are the best drivers of their generation. And what we are witnessing now is, because regulations have broadly stayed the same, it obviously naturally closes the gap as the other teams catch up to Mercedes. And so Red Bull have finally given Verstappen the car that we've all been longing for him to have, which means he can finally take the fight to Hamilton. But if you think about it, really, as you mentioned, he was only 17 when he first stepped into a Formula One car. He's still only 23 and he's in his 7th season. So he has plenty of experience under his belt, but he's still quite a young driver. And he has had it hasn't been a straightforward career for him. So at the start, he made a lot of mistakes. He's known, as Lewis said, to be a very aggressive driver. 2018, I think it was, the first 6 races, he made mistakes. And then at the 7th race in Canada, one of my journalist colleagues asked him about why he was making mistakes. And he said, if one more journalist asked me that question, I'm going to headbutt them. He can be really fiery. In 2019 in Mexico, when Lewis was going for the championship at this point, he, as Lewis Hamilton puts it, he was torpedoed by Max and said, I knew this would happen one day because Max is so aggressive. All the drivers know that we have to give him more room than normal. So Max has been on the radar of all the drivers for a while, and certainly on Hamilton's radar. And we in the media, in the British media over here, we obviously, it's great for us because Hamilton's British and we cover him and it's great for the sports. But we've known for some time, and we've said that Verstappen's probably his heir apparent, and he will go on and win championships, and he will go on and probably dominate the sport for quite a few years.
So this is that tetchy middle ground period where Hamilton's still young enough and Verstappen is good enough, and they're going to fight it out now for the next couple of championships. I was reading, and you probably remember this race, Rebecca, I was reading at, I think it was Imola, where they were tyre to tyre, and I think they brushed cars and Hamilton gave way, is what I was reading. Now, listening to Hamilton speak there after this race on Sunday, that sounded like somebody who was almost angry at himself that he had given away at Imola and had resolved never to do it again, come hell or high water, regardless of what was going to happen. That sounded like somebody who was like, okay, this kid's aggressive, and I let him away with one at Imola, and that's not happening again. That sounded like his mindset to me.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree with you, actually. I was looking at the video of that yesterday for an article I wrote, and it was interesting to watch, actually, because Lewis is known to be quite a fair racer. Obviously, he's aggressive. He's got 7 world championships. He's no shrinking violet. But as I said, Max has this reputation. And Lewis actually said on Sunday night that we played it in that clip, I won't be bullied into being less aggressive. If this is how Max is going to drive, then this is how I'm going to drive. And we saw it in Imola, as you said, and he had to concede, and Max went on and won that race. But we also saw it in the sprint race on Saturday at Silverstone, because obviously Lewis started at the front for a pole that wasn't pole in this whole rejig format that we had at the weekend. But for the sprint race start, Max had a very good start and he managed to get in front of Lewis. And Lewis apparently felt at the time that he perhaps hadn't been aggressive enough to try and get back at Max. And I think that memory sat with him. And on Sunday, he just thought, I'm not having this anymore. And at this point, because Max had gone on to win that sprint race, the gap in the championship was 33 points. Now, that's more than a race win, and it starts getting to quite an uncomfortable gap at that stage for Lewis to try and claw back into. And he said on Sunday night, you know, the gap was widening to a point I thought, this is actually going to take me quite a long time to close this up. But obviously with Verstappen crashing out and Lewis going on to win, the gap is now down to 8 points. So, yeah, it's a tricky one on this one, but I think Lewis won't be conceding anymore. The great thing is we've got another race in Hungary in 2 weeks' time, or less than 2 weeks' time now. And so they'll be back on track. I just have to say Max will be checked over by the FIA doctor, but they will rule whether or not he is fit to race. It's very likely that he will be. That will be on Thursday next week. And so we'll see these two go at it again. And it'll be really interesting to see the approach that Lewis takes, because I spoke to Damon Hill about this yesterday, and he said to me that he's never seen Lewis be so aggressive as he was in that move with Max. So that's really interesting if we're going to see this fiery side of Lewis. And then this battle, as you said, this is going to go on for years, because the great thing that happened a month or so ago was that Lewis was his contract was due to expire at the end of this year. And he's now signed on for another 2 years with Mercedes. And he said the reason he had done that was because of this battle that he's having at the moment. We've seen Lewis win championships in years gone by where, if we're completely honest, he's not really been challenged for them. We had Ferrari, Sebastian Vettel in 17 and 18. They got close, but the fight sort of fell away towards the end of the year. Valtteri Bottas, who is Hamilton's Mercedes teammate, he's a very good number 2 driver. He's a great wingman, but he's never really taken the fight to Lewis. This is the first time in this Mercedes that we are really seeing Lewis challenged for this title. And you always think, oh, of course they just want to win the championship. They don't really want to fight for it. They just want to go, and it's all about the records at the end. But Lewis is a racer. He's a fighter, and he wants to be battling someone like Verstappen because, of course, the record books will show the numbers, but he wants to be remembered for having beaten and won championships and have good races. We look back at, Prost, Senna, Hunt, Lauda, and these are the great rivalries that we remember. And I think Verstappen Hamilton is going to be one for the ages. Yeah,
it's amazing. That point about Hill not seeing Hamilton outside of his comfort zone like this and this aggressive before. I mean, I'm sure Hamilton is thinking to himself, I don't want to just be seen as the guy who waltzed to 6 in a row with the best car, and then as soon as someone challenged me, that I wilted. So there's a little bit on the line for him just beyond this championship. The two cars, Rebecca, the Mercedes car and the Red Bull car, I was reading Red Bull in particular, the last 5 races has had more speed. How do they match up at this stage?
The Red Bull definitely has more speed, as you say. It's got better race pace. They brought a new engine. Well, there's an engine freeze for this year, so the teams can't develop like they used to in years gone by. There's also a budget cap, which halts the amount of development that's happening. And on top of all of that, there's brand new regulations coming in next year. So a lot of the teams, including Mercedes, have put their focus on next year's car already, and so aren't necessarily bringing upgrades. Red Bull, however, have made the decision to focus on this car. They are obviously developing next year's, but they have put a lot of focus onto this year's car. And so in France, they brought a new engine, which was 4 races ago now, I think. It was the 5th race of the season. Lewis had won 3 of the first 4, and Mercedes were looking pretty good for it this year. Red Bull turned up in France with this new engine, and it hasn't been developed, but they have ironed out a lot of the bugs, so they're able to run the engine much higher, which gives them more pace. And since France, Red Bull then went on to win the next 5 races. So they look to have the better race car. And on Saturday at the sprint race, again, Red Bull looked to have the better race car. Even though Mercedes said they'd brought a few tweaks, it was more to do with aerodynamics. They didn't really seem to be enough to close the performance gap to Red Bull. So as it stands at the moment, Red Bull do look like they have the better race car. Okay.
One last wider point just to note when it comes to Hamilton. He is very much fighting for history. It's not just about Verstappen here. Hamilton and Michael Schumacher are on 7 world titles. So another one for Hamilton obviously moves him clear, and he can say comfortably, whether people are like it or not, he's the greatest of all time. The other point which jumps out, just looking at the record books, I had a look earlier on, often longevity is underrated, I think, when it comes to great sports people. So Schumacher's first and last of his 7 were 10 years apart. Fangio, 6 years apart from his first and his last. Prost was 8 years apart. Vettel, 4 years apart for his first and last. Jackie Stewart, 4 years apart, his first and last. Senna, just 3 years apart. Lauda, in fairness, 9 years apart from his first and his last. So Hamilton is 12 years apart from 08 through to last year and counting. So in terms of, I don't know, any dulling of the senses or fraying of the nerves, or just, you know, how difficult it is to be at your peak for a very long time. What Hamilton is doing here is extraordinary in comparison with history.
Yeah, it's amazing. And actually, he's my age, so it makes me not feel so old, which is great. It's really impressive. Hamilton's consistency has been remarkable. He has won a race in the 15 seasons that he has raced in Formula One. That is quite something to say. In many of those years, he certainly didn't have a good enough car to be doing that. He is able to outdrive what a car is able to do a lot of the time. His longevity doesn't, well, I'm not sure where the end is, to be honest. He said he's not going to race into his 40s. I believe him. He has a lot of interest outside of sports. And actually, this has been one of the key things as to why he's been able to continue for so long. When he was at McLaren, Ron Dennis was in charge, and he was quite a stickler, and he worked for racing was his life, and it was everyone's life. And if you worked at McLaren, then it was all about the racing. And it wasn't the case for Lewis. He had a lot of other interests. And if you think, he started racing when he was so young, he got picked up by McLaren, and as then they were powered by Mercedes when he was 13. And he's never really had a childhood, and he's never done other things. And as he's got older, in his late 20s, early 30s, he started discovering things like music and fashion. And so when he went over to Mercedes in 2013, one of the things that when Toto joined at the same time as him, that Toto focused in on was how to get the best out of this man who he had one world championship to his name at this point. They had obviously no idea what he was going to go on and achieve, but they certainly saw the talent. And one of the things about management, and great management, is working out how to get the best out of your employees. And Toto decided to give Lewis free rein to do whatever he wanted. So a lot of drivers' contracts, you're not allowed to do any extreme sports. You can't go skiing, you can't jump out of a plane. If you break a bone, it's very expensive for the team, and they just simply don't have the insurance for it. But we see Lewis, he's off snowboarding, he's got his place in Colorado, he goes skydiving in Dubai. He does absolutely whatever he wants. There was a moment in 2018, I think it was, where we were all flying out to Singapore feeling absolutely shattered, sort of 2/3 into the season, and he was in New York with the Tommy Hilfiger fashion show. And he then flew into Singapore on, I think it was the Thursday morning, and on Saturday set probably the greatest pole position of his life. But it's because he's able to have all of these outside interests, and because the team have allowed him to go out and do these other things, he's still so interested in racing. And when he talks about racing, you get the sense that he's that 13-year-old who just got snapped up, and it's all really exciting for him. And it means he still loves it. He's not bored of the racing because he's able to go off and do other things. And then he can come back to the one thing that he really loves the most. And it's a really interesting way of keeping him going, and it certainly worked for Mercedes.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.